I buried my father on a humid Florida morning, thinking the hardest part would be saying goodbye. I was wrong. At the funeral, relatives who barely knew him whispered that I came from a poor family, mocking the simple casket and modest service. But just as shame burned through me, a convoy of luxury black SUVs rolled up, demanding my full name. What unfolded next revealed the truth my father had hidden my entire life, a truth that rewrote everything I thought I knew about him, about myself, and about the blood that runs in my veins. By nightfall, I was no longer the girl they pitied. I was the heir they never saw coming. I always thought the quiet would comfort me on the day I buried my father. But Florida humidity has a way of pressing grief deeper into your lungs, making even the simplest breath feel like a struggle. And that morning, I felt like the world was daring me to break. The sun was too bright. The air was too heavy. And the people who claimed to love him were already whispering. I stood beside the casket, a simple mahogany box I could barely afford, and tried to hold myself together as strangers in pressed suits gave me pitying glances. My hands trembled against the folded funeral program. My dress clung to my back, damp with sweat. I kept telling myself, just get through today, just bury him, just survive this. But then I heard it. The first whisper that sliced deeper than any blade. She couldn't even afford flowers? Poor thing, guess the family really was struggling. I heard they lived in a rented trailer. I froze. Not because it wasn't true, it was but because they said it loud enough for everyone to hear. Loud enough to make sure I felt it. My father's sister, Aunt Brenda, leaned in toward another relative and added the one sentence that made my stomach twist. Some people just die the way they lived, broke. The word broke hung in the air like a curse. And for a moment, I hated them more than I hated death itself. Were they here to mourn him? Or to measure the price tag of his coffin? But their whispers were nothing compared to what happened next. Because moments later, someone would walk up behind me and reveal the first crack in the lie my father lived. I remember staring at the casket, trying so hard to stay composed. My father's hands were folded so neatly inside hands that once held mine as we walked through flea markets. He wasn't perfect. But he was mine. And he deserved more dignity than the crowd around him was willing to give. A woman in gold earrings glanced at the casket and muttered, "Closed casket. Figures." Her husband chuckled like this was some kind of joke. I gripped the edge of a folding chair just to stop myself from shaking. I wanted to scream. I wanted to leave. I wanted to tell them all to go to hell. But I just stared at the ground. Because that's what people like us do. We swallow humiliation and pretend it doesn't taste like blood. And then, I felt a tap on my shoulder. Not a gentle one. A firm, deliberate tap. I turned, expecting another insult, another opportunity for someone to look down on me. Instead, I saw a stranger. Tall, gray suit. Dark sunglasses even though the burial tent blocked most of the sun. He leaned in and spoke so quietly that I almost thought I imagined it. "Miss Parker, after the service, I need a moment of your time." My time? Why? He slipped something into my hand. Something heavy. A metal key fob. Embossed. Expensive. Not the kind you get from a car dealership. The kind you get from a private estate. I looked up, confused, but he was already walking away. Disappearing behind a row of polished cars like a shadow melting into sunlight. Who was he? Why did he know my name? And what was I supposed to do with this? I shoved the fob into my purse before anyone noticed, and tried to pretend my heartbeat hadn't just tripled. But the universe wasn't done pushing. Not even close. And before I continue, if you're still listening, I want you to stay with me. This story only gets darker, more twisted, and more unbelievable from here. Most people will hear this part and walk away afraid of what comes next. But if you're still here, subscribe. And if you won't, tell me in the comments why my father's truth isn't worth hearing. Now, back to the funeral. The pastor began the final prayer, but his words floated above me like mist. I wasn't really hearing him. I was replaying the stranger's voice over and over in my mind. "After the service, I need a moment of your time." Why? What did he want? What did my father hide from me? Before I could dive deeper into my thoughts, another voice cut through the air, sharp and judgmental. "Aunt Brenda." Again. "You know," she said loudly, "your father could have planned better, left something behind, a real man would've." A few people nodded as if she'd said something profound. Mayaf clenched. My nails dug into my palm. He did leave something behind. He left me. He left memories. He left the image of a man who worked until his hands bled just to keep food on our table. But to them, none of that mattered. To them, poor meant worthless. And then the pastor finished the prayer. And that's when everything shifted. Because just as they prepared to lower his casket into the ground, I heard engines. Multiple engines. Deep. Powerful. Not the sound of regular cars. The sound of a fleet. At first, people ignored it. We were in a cemetery, after all people come and go. But as the engines grew louder, even the pastor paused mid-sentence. Heads turned. Whispers rippled through the crowd like wind over water. I stepped out from under the tent and looked to the cemetery road. And that's when I saw them. 4 black SUVs. 1 limousine. All tinted. All spotless. All moving in perfect formation like something out of a government convoy. And they were heading straight toward us. My heart hammered against my ribs. Someone behind me muttered. Whose funeral is this again? Another said. Is that the mayor? Someone else joked. Maybe the president's coming. Everyone watched. Everyone waited. The SUVs came to a stop beside the tent. Doors opened. Men in dark suits stepped out in synchronized movements. Not one of them looked familiar. But the emblem on their lapel caught my eye, a gold crest shaped like a lion's head. I'd seen that symbol before. But only on TV. Only associated with wealth that sits behind gates and security cameras. One of the men stepped forward. He scanned the crowd once. Twice. Then his eyes landed on me. He pointed. Miss Parker. Step forward, please. And in that moment, every person who had just called me poor, every relative who pitied me, every whisper that stabbed me in the back, fell dead silent. I felt dozens of eyes burning into me. Confused. Suspicious. Suddenly afraid. I stepped forward on shaky legs. The man nodded with respect, something no one here offered me all morning. I'm here on behalf of your father, he said. We've been waiting for this day. He swallowed hard. Waiting, for what? He gestured to the limousine behind him. The driver stepped out, holding a leather folder. The man spoke again, calm, steady, almost rehearsed. For the reading of your father's real will. Miss Parker, your life is about to change. When I look back now, I realize that this was the moment everything began to tilt. The moment the world I thought I knew cracked open. But standing there, surrounded by judgmental relatives and curious strangers, all I felt was dread curling in my stomach like smoke. The man in the dark suit held the leather folder out to me with both hands, not like it was paper, but like it was something sacred. My fingers brushed the smooth cover, hesitant, almost trembling. Why would my father hide a will? Why didn't he tell me? How long had he kept this secret? The man gave me a polite, unreadable nod. The contents are meant for you alone. We request you come with us when you're ready. My throat tightened. Come with you, where? To your father's estate. Estate? The word hit me with enough force to knock the air from my lungs. Behind me, the crowd began to murmur louder this time, no longer mocking but confused. Aunt Brenda took a step forward, her painted eyebrows arched high enough to touch her hairline. What estate? James didn't have anything. She let out a sharp, humorless laugh. He lived in a 2-bedroom rental and drove that rusty old Ford until the day he. The suited man raised a single hand. A measured gesture. Calm but firm. With respect, ma'am, we are not at liberty to share details. Miss Parker will understand everything once she comes with us. Aunt Brenda scoffed, but her voice cracked at the edges, fear creeping in. That's impossible. He had nothing. We all know he had nothing. She wasn't wrong. Or maybe she wasn't right. I didn't actually know anymore. The man turned toward the other suited guards, then looked back at me. We'll give you time to say goodbye. And then, as efficiently as they had arrived, the men stepped back toward the vehicles, waiting, silently, forming a respectful perimeter around the limousine like I was some kind of dignitary. I wasn't. Not yet. Not in my mind. I was just a girl staring at her father's casket, suddenly realizing she might not have known him at all. And the truth was, I wasn't the only one he lied to. I was just the last to find out. I stood there, gripping the leather folder so tightly it left imprints in my palm. My chest tightened with a strange mixture of fear and betrayal. Dad. What did you do? The pastor tried to continue the burial prayer, but the crowd was no longer listening. People stared at me like I was some sort of puzzle they wanted desperately to solve. Two women in floral dresses whispered. Did he win the lottery? Was he involved in something illegal? Maybe he had offshore accounts. A man behind them muttered. Or maybe she paid them to make an entrance. He didn't react. He didn't blink. He didn't move. I just kept staring at the tense green carpet, at the casket beneath it, feeling like the ground was slipping under me. Why didn't he tell me? Why did he let me struggle? Why did he let me grow up thinking we barely had enough? Why did he let me feel small? A shadow fell over me. For a second, I thought the suited man had returned. But when I turned, I saw my cousin Lee, her arms crossed, her lips twisted into something between confusion and jealousy. You're not actually going with them, right? She asked. Her voice was low, sharp. They could be scammers. Or kidnappers. Or worse. He blinked. Why would they know my name? She shrugged, but her eyes flicked toward the SUVs with a panic she couldn't hide. Money makes people do crazy things. And if there was money, why wouldn't he leave anything to the family? Family. Funny word. Especially when half of them hadn't spoken to him in years. The same people who mocked us minutes ago suddenly cared deeply about his non-existent fortune. I stepped away from her, refusing to answer. The suited man approached again quietly this time. We're ready whenever you are, Miss Parker. I nodded. Before I could walk toward the limousine, Aunt Brenda's voice rang out once more. You can't just take her. She's family. He turned his head slightly, expression unchanged. Your concern is noted. But with all due respect, the only signature on the documents belongs to her. Documents. Plural. Not just the will. My stomach twisted. Aunt Brenda lunged forward and grabbed my arm. You're staying right here. I gently pulled away. No. The entire funeral went quiet. Not even the birds made a sound. I turned toward her, the woman who judged me for years, who called my father weak, who treated us like burdens. I'm going. And whatever Dad hid, is mine to find out. The murmur that rippled through the crowd felt like a wave crashing against my spine. I walked toward the limousine with my heart pounding, the leather folder pressed tightly to my chest. If you're still here, if you're still listening to this part of my father's story, don't leave now. This is exactly where things start to unravel. Most people click away when the truth gets uncomfortable. But if you're still with me, subscribe. And if you won't, go to the comments and explain why my father's secrets scare you that much. Let me tell you what happened next. The door closed behind me with a muted thump, sealing me inside the cool, leather-scented interior. The world outside, the gossiping relatives, the whispers, the cheap casket disappeared behind tinted glass. I sat there, clutching the folder, staring at my reflection. I barely recognized myself. The girl in the glass didn't look poor. She didn't look small. She didn't look forgotten. She looked afraid. But she also looked like someone standing on the edge of something enormous. The man in the gray suit slid into the seat across from me. He removed his sunglasses, revealing dark, tired eyes. My name is Mr. Rylan, he said. I've worked for your father for 15 years. 15 years? My father worked at a mechanic shop until he was diagnosed. There was no man named Rylan. No secret job. No wealth. Or so I thought. You must have the wrong person, I whispered. My father. He didn't have people working for him. He studied me not with pity, but with a strange respect. No, Miss Parker. He had people protecting him. Protecting him? My voice thinned. From who? He hesitated. And that hesitation told me more than any words could. Finally, he leaned forward. There are things your father never told you. Hard things. Dangerous things. And everything he did, everything he hid, was to keep you safe. Safe from what? Safe from who? I clutched the leather folder, suddenly afraid to open it. He nodded at it gently. You can read it now if you'd like. My fingers trembled as I opened the folder. Inside was a single sheet of thick embossed paper. I read the first line. To my daughter, the heir to the Parker Holdings legacy. My breath caught. Parker Holdings? That couldn't be right. That company was legendary. Old money. Generational wealth. Florida royalty. Everyone knew the name. Everyone except me. I read the line again, slower. To my daughter, the heir to the Parker Holdings legacy. No. No. That was impossible. My father worked at a mechanic shop. He wore the same steel-toe boots for 10 years. He paid bills with coupons. I kept reading. I hid your birthright to protect you from the people who destroyed our family. My vision blurred. Destroyed? Who? Why? My father continued, in the neat handwriting I recognized from birthday cards. When the time comes, they will come for you. Trust no one but the ones I've sent. I lowered the letter, stunned. Mr. Ryland's voice cut through the silence. You understand now why we're here, Miss Parker. I shook my head slowly. No, I don't understand any of this. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Then allow me to explain. But before he could speak, the limousine suddenly swerved. Hard. So hard the letter flew from my hand. And the last thing I heard before everything went dark was Ryland shouting. Get down. Darkness hit me like a wave. Not the soft kind that comes when you close your eyes. No. This one had teeth. This one dragged me under. I didn't black out completely, it was more like my body shut down for a second, while my mind stayed painfully awake. The limo screeched, tires screaming against asphalt. Metal groaned. Something slammed into the side of the car. And Ryland's voice, normally so calm, tore through the darkness. Down, stay down. My cheek hit the floor of the limousine. Cold leather. A tremor through the chassis. A second impact. The limo wasn't moving forward anymore. It was spinning. The world whipped past the windows in flashes, gray sky, palm trees, a smear of buildings, then sky again. I felt hands grab my shoulders, pulling me lower. Don't move! Ryland shouted. The limo slammed to a stop so violently I tasted blood. For a second. Silence. No. Not silence. Breathing. My breathing. Fast. Shallow. Panic close. And then. Pop. 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 Gunshots. Close. Too close. They tore the air open on the other side of the door. I froze. My heart, my lungs, my thoughts, everything stopped. Ryland cursed under his breath. We were followed. Stay down, Miss Parker, do not look up. Followed? Gunshots again, louder this time. The limo windows cracked, spiderweb fractures spreading across the tinted glass like frozen lightning. I couldn't stop myself. My voice trembled. Who is shooting at us? Ryland didn't answer immediately. Instead, he drew a weapon, sleek, silver, and terrifyingly real, from the inside of his suit jacket. The sight of it stole what little breath I had left. He pressed his shoulder against the door and peered through a small gap near the corner of the window. 2 vehicles, he muttered. Blacked out plates. Same pattern as before. Before? Before what? He clicked something on the side of his earpiece. This is Unit 4. We're under attack. Coordinates. A shot cracked so close I screamed. Glass exploded inward. Ryland grabbed my arm and yanked me behind the seat. You need to breathe, he said sharply. This will be over in a minute. A minute? My entire life felt like it was about to end in seconds. The limo's driver, a man I hadn't spoken to even once, opened his door. I heard the crunch of gravel as he stepped out. Then. A single shot. A body hitting the ground. I covered my mouth to stifle a cry. Ryland's voice turned ice cold. Damn it. Another shot followed. And another. Something shifted in his face, not fear. He turned toward me. Listen carefully. Do not speak. Do not run. Do not leave this car unless I tell you. But. He shook his head sharply. You want to live? Do. Not. Leave. My chest tightened, air refusing to enter. This wasn't supposed to happen. This wasn't real. This couldn't be happening the same day I buried my father. Why would anyone be shooting at me? Who even knew my name? Ryland positioned himself near the shattered window and fired twice. The sound was deafening in the small space. Someone outside screamed. He grabbed the collar of my jacket. Move, to the floor now. I crawled, my palms slipping on broken glass. Outside, another vehicle screeched to a stop. Doors slammed. Boots hit pavement. Voices shouted commands I couldn't understand. Ryland's tone softened just a fraction. Back up. They'll get us out. He fired again. I pressed myself against the floor, feeling every shudder of the car, every gunshot, every scream. And in those chaotic seconds, a horrifying thought cut through me. Someone wanted me dead. Before I could learn what my father left behind. But the worst part wasn't the bullets. It was the voices I finally recognized. At first it was just noise. Angry shouting. Boots pounding the ground. Then, a voice cut through it clearly. A voice I had heard before. A woman. A voice sharp enough to slice through bone. Find her. She has the letter. Aunt Brenda. My blood ran cold. No, that couldn't be right. I must have misheard. There was no way. But then I heard it again. Break the door. I want that folder. My entire body froze. Why would she be here? Why would she be yelling commands? Why would she want the folder? What could she possibly know? The limo shook violently as someone kicked the door. Metal groaned. Ryland swung around, eyes burning. She's here, he muttered. Of all people, she's here. He sounded genuinely shocked, and that terrified me more than the bullets. Why is my aunt? Stay quiet, he hissed. Another kick. The door bent inward. Ryland fired again. Another scream. Another body dropping. Outside, more backup vehicles screeched up. Armed men rushed forward. Shouts overlapped. Target secure. Movain. I felt the limo shift as someone tried to pry open the opposite door. Ryland pressed a hand to his earpiece. Extract the asset first. She does not fall into enemy hands. Enemy. He used that word. Not relatives. Not attackers. Not criminals. Enemy. And he meant it. What is going on? I whispered, voice cracking. He didn't answer. He grabbed my wrist, pulling me upright. We need to move, he said. They're coming for you and they're not stopping. But why? I cried. His eyes flicked to the folder still clutched to my chest. That letter is worth more than your aunt's entire life. Another explosion, this time close enough to shake the ground. Smoke seeped through the cracked window. I felt heat on my face. The world tilted. Ryland shoved open the damaged door and pulled me out. The sunlight hit me like a slap. Smoke burned my eyes. Gunfire rattled the air behind us. I stumbled, my legs barely working. Ryland wrapped an arm around me, pushing me behind a black SUV where two armed men waited. Take her, he barked. One of the men grabbed my arm. Ma'am, keep your head down and follow me. But as he guided me away, I glanced back. And I saw Aunt Brenda. Standing in the middle of the chaos. Face flushed. Eyes blazing. Screaming. Don't let her leave with that letter. My heart stopped. She wasn't confused. She wasn't scared. She wasn't trying to help. She wanted me caught. She wanted the letter. She wanted my father's secrets. She wanted everything. If you're still here, if you're still listening to what happened outside that limousine, don't disappear now. People run away from stories like this because the truth is uncomfortable. But if you're still hearing my voice, subscribe. And if you won't, go into the comments and explain why my father's enemies scare you more than the truth. Because here's what happened next. The two armed men formed a shield around me, guiding me quickly toward the second black SUV parked across the street. But we didn't make it far. A black truck, the kind used for heavy jobs or fast takedowns, barreled toward us from the opposite direction. Ryland saw it before any of us. He shouted. Left, move left. The men yanked me hard, dragging me to the side. The truck screeched to a stop inches from us. Two masked men jumped out. Everything inside me screamed. One grabbed my arm. Take the folder, he yelled. Get it from her hand. I fought with everything I had, twisting, kicking, jerking away. No. Let go. The second man raised something that looked like a taser. Rylan fired again, 3 shots in rapid succession. One man dropped instantly. The other staggered back, clutching his shoulder. I gasped for air, chest burning. A hand grabbed my waist. Not the attackers. Rylan. He pulled me behind him. You don't stop fighting, he said through clenched teeth. You hear me? You never stop fighting. But then, from behind him, another figure emerged from the smoke. My breath froze in my lungs. Tall. Broad. Face shadowed. But the voice was unmistakable. Give me the girl, Rylan, the man said softly. We both know how this ends. Rylan stiffened. My hands began to shake uncontrollably. Because I recognized that voice too. Someone I never expected to hear again. The world shrank into a thin, vibrating wire of sound. A single voice on the other end of it. Deep. Measured. A voice that once tucked me into bed when my father was too busy working late in the warehouse. A voice that carried Christmas boxes from the attic. A voice that lifted me when I scraped my knee. My uncle. Uncle Raymond. I felt my lungs lock. Not because he was here. But because of the way he said it. Give me the girl. Not Minietze. Not Amelia. Not even her. Just the girl. Like I was a package being exchanged. Rylan moved half a step to the side, blocking me with his entire body. Raymond, he said in a voice so cold it made the air shiver. Jurisdiction? Raymond chuckled. Slow, humorless. You're in over your head, boy. He swallowed hard. Ooh, Uncle Ray? He didn't look at me. Not even a flicker of acknowledgement. Rylan's jaw tightened. You shouldn't have come. And you shouldn't have interfered, Raymond said, stepping closer. This doesn't involve you. It does now. Uncle Raymond exhaled like he was disappointed. Like Rylan was a nephew who forgot to rake the leaves, not a security specialist who just shot 2 armed men in broad daylight. Then Raymond finally turned his eyes toward me. But not the way family should. Not with concern. Not even with anger. He looked at me like I was evidence. Amelia, he said. Come here. No emotion. No warmth. Nothing familiar. My stomach twisted violently. No, I whispered. He raised his eyebrows slightly. You're shaking, you're scared. You don't know what's going on. Come with me and I'll make sure no one hurts you. Rylan let out a low, humorless laugh. You're not taking her, Ray. Raymond's eyes sharpened. She's on the wrong side of this, Rylan. You know it. I know it. And her father knew it too. Those words cracked something inside me. What do you mean? I whispered. What did my father know? He ignored me. A black SUV screeched behind him, more of his men. From behind me, Rylan whispered. Run. I spun. What? I said run. The next few seconds blurred into chaos. Rylan shoved me away just as Raymond lunged. Men shouted. Boots hit asphalt. I sprinted across the sidewalk, lungs burning, vision swimming. Cars honked. People screamed at the sight of gunmen in the middle of the road. The folder bounced against my chest with every step. Someone grabbed my arm. I whipped around to fight, ready to claw their face off, but it was one of Rylan's men. Ma'am, come with me. He pulled me behind a row of parked cars, crouching low. I heard footsteps pounding behind us, Raymond's men closing in. They're circling. The guard shouted into his radio. We're boxed in. My throat tightened. Boxed in. Nowhere to run. Nowhere to hide. And Raymond, my uncle, hunting me like prey. A crack echoed across the street, a warning shot from Raymond's team. Don't waste our time, he shouted. His voice carried. Clear. Sharp. Cold. Bring me the letter, Amelia. Your father didn't die for you to have it. My heart nearly stopped. My father didn't die for me to have it. What did that mean? I peeked up over the hood of the car for one breath, just one, and saw him clearly. Raymond. No grief. No sadness. Just determination. He wanted the letter. He wanted it badly enough to shoot at the people guarding me. Badly enough to send men after me. Badly enough to kill the driver. And in that split second, something clicked. He wasn't here for money. He wasn't here for family drama. He wanted to bury something my father left behind. Something in this folder. Something that could ruin him. Rylan slid behind the car next to us, panting, blood trickling down his arm. Are you hit? I whispered. Just grazed, he muttered. Why is he doing this? My voice cracked like glass. Rylan looked at me with the kind of expression that held too many answers. He thinks you know. I don't know anything. That's what scares him. But the truth was crueler than that. Because inside the folder pressed to my chest was something handwritten. Something addressed to me. Something that could tear my family apart. And they were willing to kill me before I could open it. More trucks screeched into the lot behind us, trapping us between Raymond in front and unknown men behind. We were surrounded. Rylan whispered. Keep your head down. Crawl under the cars. Move when I move. But before we could even shift, a voice boomed from behind the line of SUVs. A voice that hit me so hard my knees almost buckled. Aunt Brenda wants her niece alive. Alive. She wanted me alive. That should have comforted me. It didn't. Not when the next sentence followed like a knife sliding between ribs. But if she opens the letter, shoot her. Cold. Final. No hesitation. Rylan grabbed my chin, forcing me to look at him. Do you have the letter? I nodded, my breath trembling. He closed his eyes like he knew this situation was spiraling faster than he could control. Then you cannot let them take you. They will kill you the moment they have it. The guard beside us whispered. We're outnumbered. We're pinned. We need a miracle. And then unexpectedly something shifted in the air. A low rumble. An engine. Loud. Powerful. A black luxury sedan, older, heavy, armored, turned the corner and sped into the parking lot with brutal confidence. My heart lodged in my throat. No one in my family owned a car like that. Not Aunt Brenda. Not Uncle Raymond. But someone did. The driver's door opened slowly. Like a scene out of an old crime film. Black dress shoes. Gray slacks. A cane tapping the ground. A man stepped out. Tall. Lean. Eyes hidden behind sunglasses. Silver streaks through his hair. The entire parking lot fell silent. Even Raymond's men hesitated. Because they recognized him. And so did I. My father's oldest friend. The man who disappeared from our lives 10 years ago. The man whose name my father whispered only once with fear. Luciano Vargas. Rylan's breath caught. Not him. Raymond took a single step back. Why is he here? Luciano walked with slow, deliberate steps until he was only a few yards away. He didn't look at Raymond. He didn't look at Rylan. He looked at me. Directly. Like he knew me. Like he'd been waiting for this exact moment. Amelia, he said, his voice deep and impossibly calm. You're coming with me. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. What? My voice cracked. Why? He lifted his hand slightly, not threatening, but commanding. Because your father asked me to protect you. The day before he died. Raymond froze. Aunt Brenda's men ven still. Even Rylan's expression changed, shock tightening every muscle in his face. I stepped backward, my back hitting the bumper of the car. What are you talking about? My father didn't say anything. He didn't. Luciano removed his sunglasses. His eyes were steady. Dead serious. Your father knew he was going to die. And he left the truth with me. Not with your aunt. Not with your uncle. Not with anyone else. He pointed to the folder against my chest. And that letter isn't just an inheritance. He paused, letting the words hang like a blade. It's a confession. My blood ran cold. A confession? Of what? Rylan whispered, don't react. Don't let him see fear. But it was too late. I was already shaking. Luciano took one more step forward. And if you read it, he said softly, you'll learn why your father was murdered. My breath ripped out of me. Murdered. Not heart attack. Not natural causes. Murder. The world tilted. The parking lot spun. And then, darkness slammed down around the edges of my vision. Because chapter 3 didn't end with Luciano's words. It ended with Raymond raising his gun, aimed at my chest, and whispering the sentence that shattered the last piece of my childhood. Your father should have destroyed that letter. Before you ever existed. The world didn't just blur, it ripped. Everything slowed. Raymond's gun leveled directly at me. Luciano's face didn't move. Ryland's breath caught in his throat. And my own heartbeat slammed so hard it echoed in my skull. My father should have destroyed that letter, before you ever existed. That sentence ricocheted inside me like an explosion. Before I ever existed? What did that even mean? Raymond's finger tightened on the trigger. And then, Ryland tackled me. The gunshot cracked through the air like a line snapping under pressure. Heat slammed past my ear. My head hit the pavement. The folder flew out of my hand, spinning across the asphalt. Ryland shielded me with his body and yelled. Move! Move her now! Chaos detonated around us. Luciano shouted something in Italian. Raymond yelled for his men to push forward. Bullets pinged against car doors. Tires screeched. People screamed. And I lay there stunned staring at the folder lying 5 feet away. Just out of reach. A single breeze lifted its corner. I reached out instinctively, fingertips trembling. But a black boot stepped on it. My breath froze. A man reached down hand-gloved, posture sure, and picked up the folder with a slow, almost reverent motion. He didn't look at me. Or at the gunfire. Or at the chaos. He only looked at the folder. Then finally he turned his head. It wasn't Raymond. Not one of his men. Not even Luciano. It was a stranger. Tall, muscular, a scar cutting across his eyebrow. Expression unreadable. He slid the folder under his jacket and activated a small earpiece. Package secure. Package. That word slammed into me harder than the gunshot. He wasn't connected to Raymond. He wasn't with Aunt Brenda's people. He wasn't with Luciano's side either. He was someone else entirely. A third faction. A third hunter. And he had my father's letter. Before I could scream, he reached for me, not with panic, not with aggression, with certainty, like he fully expected to walk away with both me and the folder. But Ryland wasn't having it. He shoved the man backwards so hard the stranger stumbled. Back off! Ryland barked, aiming his gun at the man's chest. The stranger didn't raise his hands. Didn't. He simply tilted his head, studying Ryland with the cool curiosity of a scientist examining a problem under glass. Your orders weren't to interfere, he said calmly. Step aside. She's coming with me. Ryland's voice dropped to a low growl. She isn't going anywhere with you. The stranger sighed. Then you'll die. And he lunged. The two men collided so hard the car behind them shook. The stranger moved like he'd trained for this exact scenario, sharp, efficient, brutal. A strike to Ryland's ribs. A knee to the thigh. A wrenching twist of the wrist to disarm him. It was over in seconds. Ryland hit the ground, coughing blood. I screamed his name. The stranger glanced at me. Your protector is competent, he said evenly. But he was never trained to fight someone like me. He reached for me again. I crawled backward, palms scraping against pavement. Don't touch me, I shouted. He didn't stop. He took another step. Another. I was cornered between two cars, nowhere to run. My breath turned shallow, my head spinning. The world smelled like burning metal and smoke. He reached down. And a cane cracked against his forearm with a sickening thud. Luciano. He stood over me like a shadow pulled from another era, dark, elegant, terrifyingly calm. You misunderstand, Luciano said softly. She is not yours. The stranger flinched, gripping his arm. Then he smirked. Old men with canes should stay home. Luciano tapped his cane against the ground once. You first. The stranger charged. Luciano didn't move like an old man. He moved like a weapon. His cane struck the stranger's knee. Then his jaw. Then the side of his ribs. Every hit precise. Measured. Surgical. The stranger stumbled backward. Momentarily off balance. I had never seen anything like it. Raymond's men stared. Aunt Brenda's people froze. Even Ryland bleeding looked stunned. No one had expected Luciano Vargas to fight at all. Certainly not like this. The stranger wiped blood from his lip. You're not supposed to be alive. Luciano gave a thin, dangerous smile. People have been saying that for years. The stranger reached into his jacket, maybe for a weapon. But Ryland tackled him again, this time with a roar, fueled by pure survival instinct. They crashed to the ground. Luciano grabbed me by the shoulders. Get up, he ordered. Now. My legs shook. Can't. Yes, he snapped. You can. And you will. He pulled me to my feet with surprising strength. Then he grabbed my chin, forcing my eyes toward the street. Look at them, he said. Your aunt. Your uncle. They're men. I looked. Aunt Brenda's team was advancing. Raymond was shouting orders. The stranger fighting Rylan had allies moving in. We have seconds, Luciano said. Not minutes. Seconds. He swallowed hard. What do they want? Why are they doing this? What is in that letter? Luciano leaned in, voice low. That letter is the reason your father died. And if they get you, you will join him. My heart dropped into a void. No, I whispered. No, this can't. It can, he said sharply. And it is. I shook my head. My aunt and uncle would never. But he cut me off. They have been waiting for this moment for 16 years. Waiting for you to be alone. Vulnerable, unprotected. I felt mi nesh bukle. 16 years. The age my father first whispered that mysterious name. The age he started locking his study. The age he told me never to trust anyone in the family except him. I had thought he was being overprotective. Turns out he had been trying to keep me alive. Luciano tightened his grip on my arm. You want the truth? He whispered. Then survive long enough to hear it. Behind us, the stranger slammed Rylan's head into the ground. Aunt Brenda screamed. Get her now. And just when everything looked like it was tearing open, Luciano pushed me toward the back wall of the lot. A metal door. A maintenance entrance. Unmarked. Invisible unless you knew it existed. He shoved a keycard into the lock. Inside, now. My voice trembled, cracking with panic. What about Rylan? Luciano's jaw tightened. He will buy you time. But he'll die. Luciano snapped. Your father chose him for this. That sentence shattered me. Go, he said. Don't make his death meaningless. Before I could protest. Before I could say anything. The door buzzed open. And Luciano shoved me through. The darkness swallowed me whole. And the last thing I heard before the heavy metal door slammed shut was Rylan's voice, bruised, desperate, fighting to stay conscious. Keep running, Emilia, don't let them take you. That was the moment I began to understand. This wasn't a family dispute. This wasn't inheritance drama. This wasn't greed. My father had been playing a dangerous game long before I was born. And the letter, the one I never got to open, was the one thing every faction here was willing to kill for. Because whatever truth my father left, it could burn all of them. I don't know how long I sat in the parking lot after walking out of that warehouse. 5 minutes. 30. An hour. Time stopped making sense. The city around me kept moving, engines humming. A distant siren. The low thrum of life going on while I sat frozen behind the wheel. The final image I saw inside that building kept looping in my head like a cruel film reel I couldn't shut off. Thomas. My husband. Laughing. Holding her waist. Talking about me like I was a brand. A tool. A pawn. And George, his loyal partner, standing there, nodding along like he wasn't the one who used to tell me he admired my work ethic whenever he visited our home. It was the first time I truly understood what betrayal felt like. Not the sharp, dramatic kind you see in movies. The quiet kind. The cold kind. The kind that drains the temperature from your bones until you're shivering from the inside out. Eventually, I turned the ignition. The engine's rumble sounded different, like it was part of a world I no longer recognized. I drove home on autopilot. No music. No thoughts. Just numbness. When I stepped inside the house, the air felt unfamiliar. As if even the walls knew something had shifted in me. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't pack my bags. But something inside me, something small and tired, finally broke loose and whispered, "You're done accepting this." I walked straight upstairs, passing the hallway photos of Thomas and me, fake smiles, fake happiness, fake stability. Every picture suddenly felt like an exhibit in a museum dedicated to lies. In our bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my hands. They weren't clenched. They were steady. Almost too steady. A strange calm washed over me. Not peace. Not forgiveness. Clarity. The kind that only comes when you've lost everything you thought you had. I whispered softly, almost afraid the room would overhear. If he can play dirty, so can I. But I meant something different, something more calculated. More strategic. More permanent. I wasn't going to slash his tires. I wasn't going to expose him in front of his board. I wasn't going to run to the press or curse his name on social media. Those things were loud. What I needed was quiet. Invisible. Unseen. Everything is so well crafted. He wouldn't know it had begun until it was already over. I stood, walked to the mirror, and faced my reflection. My eyes looked different. Older. Sharper. Focused. I pulled my hair into a tight bun, wiped away the smudge under my eye, and said to the woman staring back, "No more being the good wife." And for the first time in years, I felt like myself. I went downstairs and poured a glass of water. My hands didn't tremble when I lifted it. Before I could take a sip, the front door opened. Footsteps. Slow, confident, practiced. Thomas. He didn't move. Didn't turn to look. He stepped into the kitchen with that same charming smile he used in public, the one that convinced the world he was a golden husband. "Hey sweetheart," he said casually, loosening his tie. "I didn't expect you home this early." I finally turned. He didn't notice my expression. Or maybe he did and underestimated it. "Rough day?" he asked. My voice came out steady, cold enough to frost the edges of my words. "Enlightening." He raised an eyebrow, amused. I set the glass down carefully, making sure the sound was soft, not dramatic, not loud, just controlled. "Yes," I said. "Very enlightening." He shrugged, uninterested. "Well, I'm exhausted. I'm going to shower and lie down." "You coming up?" "Not yet." "Oh, not yet." "Go ahead," I said. He nodded and walked out of the kitchen as if he hadn't just called me deadweight in a warehouse a few hours earlier. As he disappeared up the stairs, something unexpected happened. I smiled. A small, private, dangerous smile. Because in that moment, I realized something powerful. He didn't suspect a thing. He had no idea I knew. No idea his world had silently shifted. No idea his wife, the woman he dismissed, ignored, and publicly humiliated, had just stepped into the coldest version of herself. And he had absolutely no idea that his life, his company, and his carefully constructed empire were about to slip right through his fingers. Not tonight. Not tomorrow. But soon. Very soon. I walked to the living room, sat down neatly, and pulled out my phone. There were two people I needed to contact. Two people who would become the quiet architects of a destruction Thomas would never see coming. And as I typed the first message, that dangerous smile lingered. Because chapter 4 didn't end with heartbreak. It ended with awakening. And revenge was no longer a fantasy. It was a plan. A plan already set in motion. The house was silent after Thomas went upstairs. Not peaceful. Not comforting. Just silent. The kind of silence that feels like the air is holding its breath. I stayed seated on the couch, phone in hand, the blue glow reflecting off my fingers. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't hesitating. For the first time in years, I wasn't operating from emotion, I was operating from clarity. And clarity was a dangerous thing. There were two contacts I needed. Two people who didn't know each other. Two threads I was about to weave into one very precise trap. I opened the first message thread. Avery Holt. My former mentor. A woman who understood corporate warfare better than anyone I'd ever met. We hadn't spoken in almost a year, not because of a falling out, but because Thomas didn't like me taking advice from outsiders. His words, not mine. Avery wasn't an outsider. She was the mind behind half the systems Thomas used in his own company. Systems he claimed credit for. Systems he weaponized to get ahead. I typed slowly, deliberately. Avery, I need a meeting. Tonight if possible. I hovered over the send button for a single beat. Then pressed it. The message delivered instantly. 3 dots appeared almost immediately. Avery didn't hesitate. Where? That single word tightened something in my chest. Not fear, gratitude. I gave her the location, a quiet, 24-hour cafe on the north side of the city. Neutral ground. The second contact would be trickier. I returned to my home screen, thumb hovering over a name I hadn't spoken aloud in 2 years. Marshall Penn. Thomas's former CFO. Former because Thomas forced him out after a disagreement over financial ethics. Publicly, Thomas claimed misalignment of vision. Privately, he called him dead weight. I had my own name for Marshall. The man who knew where the bodies were buried. I took a breath deep, focused and typed. Marshall, it's Madison. I have something you'll want to hear. Meet me tomorrow morning? This time, I did hesitate before pressing send. The truth was simple. I didn't know if Marshall held resentment toward the company, or toward me for being married to the man who pushed him out. But I was about to find out. I pressed send. Then, for the first time since stepping out of that warehouse, the tightness in my chest loosened. Steps echoed upstairs. Water running. The faint slam of a drawer. Thomas moving through our house like it still belonged to him, like everything still belonged to him. He had no idea the foundation was already cracking under his feet. I stood, grabbed my coat, and slipped my keys into my pocket. The house was too quiet, too heavy, and I needed air, real air, not the filtered sterility of a home built on pretenses. As I walked toward the front door, I paused. My wedding photo hung on the wall framed in silver, taken on a warm summer afternoon. Thomas kissing my forehead while I smiled like I actually believed in forever. I studied it for a long moment. Then I reached out and flipped the frame face down. A small gesture. Almost insignificant. But it felt like the beginning of something irreversible. The drive to the cafe was quiet, the road lit only by the occasional street lamp. The city seemed different tonight, colder, sharper, like it was reflecting back the shift inside me. By the time I pulled into the gravel lot, Avery was already there. Of course she was. She stood leaning against her dark sedan, arms crossed, sharp eyes following me as I stepped out of the car. Madison, she said with that low, steady voice she'd always had. I exhaled a humorless breath. You have no idea. She motioned toward the entrance. Let's talk. Inside, the cafe smelled like burnt espresso and old wood. A few night shift workers sat hunched over laptops, but no one paid us any attention. We took a booth in the corner where the light didn't reach us. Avery didn't waste time. What did he do? Not did something happen? Not is everything okay? No. She knew the look of betrayal when she saw one. I stared at the table for a moment, then lifted my eyes to hers. Thomas is planning to push me out, I said quietly. Not just out of his life. Out of the company. Completely. Avery's jaw tightened. I warned you he'd try something like that eventually. I swallowed the sting of that truth. I know. I just didn't think he'd go this far. She leaned forward. What exactly did you hear? I repeated everything. The warehouse. The planning. The belittling. The woman. The coldness. The strategy behind my back. Avery didn't interrupt. She didn't gasp. She didn't comfort. She analyzed. When I finished, she sat back and folded her hands calmly. Well, she said, there's the emotional response. And there's the strategic one. Which path do you want? I didn't even pause. Strategic. A slow smile formed on her face, not warm, not sympathetic. Approving. Good. Then you'll need leverage. I nodded. I already messaged Marshall. Her eyebrows lifted. Smart. He knows the company's weak points better than anyone. If he agrees to talk, you'll have your first piece. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small leather notebook. And second, she said, flipping it open. We build a map. A map? I asked. A blueprint, she clarified. If you want to dismantle Thomas's empire, you can't just react. You need a plan with layers he won't see coming. She clicked her pen. The sound felt like the start of something irreversible. Tell me everything, Avery said. Not just what he did today. Tell me how the company runs. Who's loyal to him? Who's not? Where the money moves. What your name is attached to. And I did. I talked for nearly an hour. About the departments. The board members. The initiatives. The digital systems. The loopholes only insiders knew. Avery wrote silently. Focused. Unbothered by the weight of what we were planning. By the time I finished, she had 3 full pages of notes. She looked up. "This isn't going to be fast," she warned. "And it isn't going to be clean. But if you do exactly what I tell you, you won't just protect yourself." She slid the notebook slightly toward me. "You'll take the company right out from under him." My breath caught. Not fear. Not excitement. Recognition. Everything was beginning to align. Everything that had been broken was rearranging itself into purpose. Avery closed the notebook. "Tomorrow," she said, "starts phase 1. I swallowed. Phase 1? Her eyes darkened not with malice, but with precision. "Exposure," she said. "But not the obvious kind." She paused. "We don't attack Thomas first. We make him fight shadows he can't see." A chill ran through me. Avery stood, smoothing her coat. "Get some sleep," she said. "You'll need it." Sleep. The idea almost made me laugh. Because this wasn't the end of a long day. This was the beginning of a very long game. And I was no longer the person who walked into that warehouse. The morning sun hit Florida in sharp angles, cutting through the blinds of the cafe where I waited for Marshall. I had slept for maybe 2 hours staring at the ceiling, replaying the warehouse attack, imagining every possible scenario, but I felt ready. Cold, precise, prepared. Marshall arrived exactly on time. Tall, lean, gray starting at his temples, eyes sharp, practiced, and suspicious. He had the kind of presence that made you immediately aware of how much intelligence he had stored, and how little he trusted anyone else. "Madison," he said, voice low. I nodded. Not a smile. Not relief. Not yet. He slid into the booth across from me. "You've changed," he said after a moment. Not accusing, not admiring. Observing. "I've been through hell," I said simply. "And I need to know exactly what I'm walking into." He leaned back, folding his arms. "You want leverage? Then you have to see the cracks yourself. The skeletons Thomas buried, the weaknesses he assumes no one can touch." I listened, leaning forward, letting him set the pace. Marshall took a deep breath. The board meetings he just ran last quarter. He ignored certain liabilities on purpose. Legal loopholes only someone outside could exploit. I flagged them. He fired me. I narrowed my eyes. "Why didn't you tell me then?" He smirked faintly. "Because he wanted me gone, and you were married to him. I wasn't risking you." I felt I owed part shock, part appreciation. Not gratitude. Just recognition of truth. Marshall continued. "He thinks loyalty is currency. But the truth? It's expendable. His closest allies will betray him in a heartbeat if someone with power calls the right cards." A map began forming in my mind. Every detail he dropped became a step in my strategy. Every omission, a potential trap. "And this letter," I said softly, almost too quiet. "Do you know what's in it?" Marshall hesitated. "I don't know the full content," he admitted. "But I know its importance. Enough to understand why everyone's gone insane over it. Whoever holds that letter controls the game." A thrill of fear and excitement collided in my chest. The game wasn't just about money anymore. It was about power. Survival. Legacy. I nodded slowly. "Then we do this right. Step by step." Marshall's lips tightened. "Step by step?" "Yes," I said. "I'm not going to rush. I need to dismantle him cleanly. And I need to protect myself." A shadow of a smile appeared on his face. "Finally. Someone thinking like me." We spent hours mapping Thomas's empire. Who controlled the accounts? Who had the real signatures? Who answered to whom? Who could be bought or scared? Every name, every connection, every weak point became another node on the mental map I was building. By the time we left the cafe, I had a plan forming in my mind that was terrifying in its clarity. Thomas had to be distracted, undermined in ways he wouldn't notice immediately. And phase 2. Exposure. We would chip away at his empire, quietly, invisibly, until the final collapse. But there was one complication, one wildcard I hadn't accounted for. As I stepped out of the cafe, I glanced at the street. And saw a black SUV idling across the road. No license plate. Tinted windows. The same pattern from the warehouse. My heart sank. And then I froze. A single window rolled down. A woman's face appeared for a fraction of a second. Aunt Brenda. She was watching me. Not heeding, not afraid. Just observing. And that made everything clear. The war wasn't just corporate. It wasn't just about power. It wasn't even just revenge. It was personal. Her eyes met mine. And I realized something terrible. She knew I had begun my move. She was ready. She was waiting. And that meant I had only one choice. Move faster than she expected. If you think what I've told you so far is the worst of it, you haven't seen anything yet. People who betray you don't just disappear quietly. They watch. They plan. They wait. And the next step? It's about shadows, secrets, and a game that could destroy us both. If you're still listening, subscribe. Or go into the comments and tell me why you're letting Aunt Brenda's kind of treachery scare you more than the truth. The morning air smelled sharp and metallic, like rain mixed with exhaust. I could feel it biting at my lungs, reminding me that the world outside the cafe outside the house was dangerous. And I wasn't stepping back anymore. Marshall had left early, armed with spreadsheets, insider intel, and warnings that kept echoing in my mind. Move carefully. One misstep and he'll crush you before you even blink. I wasn't worried about him. And Aunt Brenda. She was the unpredictable variable in a game that needed precision. I parked outside Thomas's corporate headquarters. The building towered over me, reflective glass swallowing the sunlight, corporate arrogance incarnate. Inside, Thomas ruled his empire with the same cold confidence that had humiliated me for years. He didn't suspect a thing. I took a deep breath, checking my reflection in the rearview mirror. Eyes steady. Jaw set. Hands unshaking. This was no longer fear. This was purpose. I entered through the side entrance, avoiding the reception cameras I'd memorized thanks to Marshall. Employees passed me, oblivious. Some smiled. Some nodded. All of them unaware that their lives were about to become chess pieces in a game far beyond them. The office was quiet, nearly empty. Thomas's office was on the top floor. I didn't go there. Not yet. Phase 1 had to be invisible. Subtle. Strategic. I tapped into the internal server using credentials I shouldn't have had. A digital footprint. The key to uncovering everything Thomas believed secure. The moment I logged in, I felt it a surge of power. Information flowing. Connections forming. Weaknesses appearing like cracks in marble. I pulled up the first document. It wasn't sensitive. Not yet. Just minor discrepancies in financial transfers. Tiny enough that no one would notice immediately. But those small cracks? They were the first dominoes. I copied the data, encrypted it, and sent it to a secure channel Marshall had set up. Phase 1. Step 1. Complete. And that's when I heard it. Footsteps on the marble stairs. Deliberate. Slow. Purposeful. I froze. Not in panic, but in calculation. Thomas? No. Too controlled for him to make that noise. Aunt Brenda. I ducked behind a cubicle, heart beating, mind racing. She moved like a predator who knows exactly where her prey is hiding. Looking for me? I whispered, almost inaudible. No answer. Just the soft hum of the fluorescent lights. I knew she was close. Too close. And the moment she found me, everything would explode. I had a decision to make: retreat or engage. Retreat meant abandoning the first step of phase 1. Engage meant exposing myself to her unpredictability. And I didn't hesitate. I stood. Moved deliberately toward the main corridor. Aunt Brenda would see me coming. She did. And she smiled. Not a warm smile. Not a familial one. A smile that promised danger, chaos, and betrayal. For the first time, I understood something my father must have known. The people closest to you, those who should protect you, can sometimes be the ones trying to destroy you. She stepped forward. Madison, she said, voice smooth, almost teasing. You really think you can play this game? I don't think, I replied. I know. And then phase 1. Step 2, an invisible surgical strike was about to begin. If you think this is just about betrayal and business, think again. Some games are about blood, some are about legacy, and some Some are about proving who you really are when the world is trying to bury you alive. If you're still here, still listening, subscribe. And if you won't, go into the comments and tell me why shadows like Aunt Brenda scare you more than the truth. Aunt Brenda closed the distance between us with the slow, confident steps of someone who believes she already won. Her heels clicked against the polished marble, echoing through the half-empty office floor like a countdown. He didn't move. Didn't blink. Didn't give her the satisfaction of stepping back. She looked me up and down, amusement curling the corner of her mouth. You really shouldn't be here, she murmured. You're in over your head. I tilted my chin slightly. Funny. That's exactly what Dad used to say to you. Her expression twitched just once, but it was enough. A crack. A small one. A warning that the name alone still had power. Good. I needed that power. She stepped closer until we were separated by barely a foot. Her perfume a sharp floral bite cut through the cold air. You think your father left you anything worth fighting over? She asked softly. If he had something valuable, I would have found it long ago. You tried, I said. You just didn't find it before he died. Her eyes snapped to mine. A flash of something dark, anger, frustration, panic flickered there. So she had searched. And she'd failed. My pulse steadied. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't the one cornered. I was the one with the advantage. She leaned in. Give me the letter. That was it. No pretense. No cousin of family act. Just a demand. Cold. Sharp. Naked. And that told me everything. You don't even know what the letter says, I whispered. Aunt Brenda's jaw tightened. You don't know what it means. Neither do you. Her hand shot out faster than I expected. She grabbed my wrist hard, her nails digging into my skin. But he didn't flinch. Didn't pull away. Il était esquissada. Because while she focused on trying to intimidate me, I tapped my phone screen behind my back with the other hand. A soft vibration. Phase 1. Step 2. Activated. Her gaze sharpened. What did you do? I smiled, not a big one, just enough to unsettle. Nothing you can stop. She squeezed my wrist harder, but something had shifted. She felt it. The change. The imbalance. You're playing a dangerous game, Madison. Then you should have picked someone else to play with. Her eyes flicked down to the phone I had just put back into my pocket. It was too late. The entire building's financial server, every locked folder, every private document Thomas had hoarded was currently being mirrored and extracted into an encrypted vault Marshall controlled. Aunt Brenda didn't know the details, but she knew enough to realize she had just lost something important. She released my wrist. Not out of mercy. Out of calculation. You think this makes you powerful? She asked quietly. No, I said. It makes me prepared. And then, just before she could move again, the lights flickered. Once. Twice. Then everything went dark. Emergency backup lights flashed on, washing the office in a cold red glow. Aunt Brenda's eyes widened. She wasn't behind this. Neither was I. Someone else had just entered the game. A voice echoed from the far end of the floor. You really shouldn't have come alone, Madison. I knew that voice. I turned slowly. And there he was. The man with the shadowed face from the attack. The man whose voice had frozen my blood. The man who had ordered Rylan to give me the girl. He stepped forward, calm and confident. Tall. Broad-shouldered. Expression unreadable. He looked at Aunt Brenda first. You were supposed to keep her contained. Aunt Brenda stiffened, bristling. I had it under control. No. He said simply. You didn't. He turned his eyes to me. And for a brief, terrifying moment, I saw recognition. Not the I know your name kind. The I've been watching you longer than you realize kind. You made your first move, he said. So now I'll make mine. My pulse thundered in my ears. Aunt Brenda stepped away from me, not toward me, but toward him. Like she was siding with him. Like they had been aligned the whole time. My stomach twisted. Who was he? He stopped a foot away, eyes fixed on me. Whatever you think your father left you, he said in a low voice, you are not ready for what happens when you try to use it. He swallowed hard. Watch me. His lips curved not into a smile, but something worse. Interest. Amusement. Challenge. Very well, he murmured. Then let's see if you survive phase 2. He turned away as the lights flickered again, plunging the entire floor into temporary darkness. When the emergency lights returned, he was gone. Aunt Brenda too. Just me. Alone. Standing at the crossroads of a war my father had started long before I understood the rules. If you're still listening, if you're still following this disaster I'm walking into, don't stop now. Most people quit when the shadows start talking back. Most people run when strangers know their name and their father's secrets. But if you're still here, still breathing with me through this, subscribe. And if you won't, go into the comments and tell me why men like him still haunt you in the dark. Because what happened next wasn't survival. It was escalation. The night settled over the city with that strange quiet that makes everything feel staged, like the world was holding its breath for what came next. I drove home without turning on the radio. Silence felt softer, more honest. Every thought bounced against the inside of my skull, sharpening itself like a blade. Phase 1 was in motion. The data transfer was complete. The discrepancies planted. The pressure points identified. But none of that stopped the image replaying in my mind. Aunt Brenda's smile. That slow, venomous curl of the lips. Like she'd already written a eulogy with my name on it. I should have been afraid. Shaking. Second-guessing. But instead, I felt olive. Cold. Focused. Like someone who had finally stepped off the ledge and learned she could fly. When I reached the house, the porch light was off. Odd. Marshall always left it on for visibility. His word. His habit. The air felt heavier as I unlocked the door. Inside, everything was neat. Still. Too still. Then I saw him. Marshall sitting at the dining table under the dim pendant light, hands clasped, shoulders tense, eyes fixed on me like he'd been rehearsing a speech. I set my keys down slowly. What happened? I asked. He didn't blink. Someone broke into my apartment tonight. My stomach tightened. Was anything taken? No. His jaw clenched. But they searched. Not sloppily. Not desperate. Intentional. Methodical. They were looking for something specific. The letter. It had to be. And if they didn't find it there, that meant they would be shifting their attention. To me. To us. Marshall leaned forward, voice low. This isn't just corporate sabotage anymore, Madison. This is bigger. More deliberate. Whoever's watching, whoever Brenda's working with, wants information that nobody should have. I sat down opposite him, my voice steady despite the electric panic tightening my chest. Then we stay ahead of them. He stared at me like I'd just said something impossible. Do you hear yourself? Most people would run. A bitter smile crept out of me. I've spent years running from humiliation, from Thomas, from the truth. I'm done. He exhaled, half defeated, half impressed. Then we need phase 2. He said. I swallowed. Phase 2 was the dangerous part. The part where the trap tightens. Not on me. On Thomas. We move tomorrow, I said. Marshall nodded, though I saw the flicker of fear in his eyes. Not fear for himself. Fear for me. Later that night, after he left, I stood alone in the kitchen. The refrigerator hummed. The clock ticked. The world seemed normal. But my body knew better. I felt watched. Observed. Measured. I walked to the window and pulled the curtain back slightly. A black sedan sat across the street. Engine off. Lights off. But the silhouette inside, unmoving. Unmistakable. Not Thomas. He wasn't subtle enough. Brenda's people. And they weren't there to intimidate me. They were there to study me. Predict me. Trap me. People think revenge is about rage. But that's not true. Revenge is math. Measuring the distance between what someone did to you and what you're willing to do in return. And as I stared at that shadowy figure in the car, I felt a calm certainty settle over me. They thought they were closing in. They thought they were hunting me. But they had no idea. I had already set the snare. And when it snapped shut, Thomas wouldn't be the only one caught in it. You're still here. Still listening. Still following Madison deeper into the maze. So do what the smart ones do. Hit subscribe. And if you decide not to, explain in the comments why you'd stand unprotected while people like Aunt Brenda watch from the dark. I barely slept. Even with the curtains drawn, I felt the weight of that silent sedan across the street pressing through the walls like its presence seeped into the air and settled on my skin. By morning, the car was gone. Not reassuring. Just confirmation that whoever was watching me operated on a schedule that didn't include mercy. I brewed coffee, hands steady, mind sharper than the bitterness filling the kitchen. I'd been pushed, cornered, humiliated. But not anymore. Today, phase 2 began. Marshall arrived exactly on time, knocking twice the way he always did. He walked intense, scanning the room as if expecting someone to leap out of the shadows. They moved last night, he said. No break-in. But there were footprints outside my back door. I nodded. They're tightening their circle. His eyes narrowed. And you're calm. I've been in worse cages, I said quietly. At least this one has exits. We sat at the table, the morning light slanting across the wood in thin gold stripes. Marshall opened his laptop. Okay, we need to push Thomas toward exposure, but it has to look organic like he did it to himself. I leaned forward. Pressure points. He nodded. Exactly. Your husband has 2 fatal flaws. Ego and fear. When those collide, he panics. And panicked men make sloppy decisions. I almost smiled. I had lived inside the chaos of Thomas's emotional patterns for years. I knew how easily he spiraled when control slipped out of his fingers. So, Marshall continued. We hit his company where he's most vulnerable, the internal audit scheduled in 8 days. 8 days, I repeated. That's how long we have. No, he corrected. That's how long he has. I let the words settle. 8 days until Thomas's empire began to crack from the inside because of the tiny fractures I'd already planted. But before we could plan our next steps, the doorbell rang. Not a soft ring. Not hesitant. A firm, confident press. Marshall froze. I felt it too. Something shifted in the air, a chill crawling up my spine. I walked toward the door slowly, each footstep echoing. Through the peephole, I saw her. Aunt Brenda. Hair perfect. Expression unreadable. Hands clasped like she was stopping by for tea. Marshall whispered, "Don't open it." I did. The door creaked slightly as I pulled it back. She stepped inside without waiting to be invited, moving past me like she owned the oxygen in the room. "Madison," she said, her voice smooth as polished stone. "We need to talk." Marshall stood up, protective but silent. Brenda's eyes flicked to him, then back to me. "You trust the wrong people," she said softly. "And you're stepping into a game you don't understand." I stared back without blinking. "Then explain it." She tilted her head, studying me like she was deciphering a puzzle. "You have something that doesn't belong to you," she said. "And someone is willing to go very far to get it back." "The letter," I said. Marshall shot me a warning glance. But Brenda smiled. "So you do know what you're holding." She stepped closer, her perfume drifting around her like a deceptive fog. "Hand it over," she said, "and everything returns to normal." There it was. The lie. Normal. A word that meant silence, submission, invisibility. I shook my head slowly. "No." Her smile didn't falter. But her eyes turned cold. "Then understand this." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "You're not fighting a man anymore. You're fighting the people who made him." A chill ran through my spine. Before I could respond, she reached into her coat and for an instant, Marshall moved like he might tackle her, but she only pulled out a small black phone. She placed it on the table, tapping the screen once. A video began to play. And the moment I saw what was on it, my breath caught in my throat. Footage. Inside Thomas's office. Inside our home. Inside rooms I didn't even know had cameras. Brenda watched my reaction carefully. "You see? You're already surrounded," she murmured. "You're already losing." She closed the phone and slipped it back into her coat. 8 days, she said. "That's how long you have. Not to win." She leaned in. Lips almost at my ear. "But to survive." Then she turned and walked out of the house. The door clicked shut behind her. Marshall breathed out shakily. "Madison, you realize what that means, right?" I looked at the empty doorway, my pulse steadying into something colder. Something sharper. "It means," I said quietly, We hit a nerve. And now? Now they were scared. If you're still here, still following Madison as she steps deeper into the labyrinth, you know the drill. Tap subscribe before someone like Aunt Brenda decides you don't need the truth. And if you won't, explain in the comments why you'd keep the lights off when the watchers are already at your door. Morning blurred into afternoon. Neither Marshall nor I spoke for nearly an hour after Aunt Brenda left, the weight of her visit lingering like smoke, acidic and impossible to ignore. Finally, Marshall closed his laptop with a soft click. "We're out of time," he said. "They've escalated. That means we escalate faster." I exhaled slowly. "What's our next move?" He rubbed the bridge of his nose, thinking hard, calculating like someone defusing a bomb with shaking hands but refusing to show the fear. "The internal audit," he said. "Normally it's routine. But when a company is hiding something as big as what Thomas is hiding, audits turn into minefields." I leaned forward. "Tell me exactly how we use that." He nodded. "Step 1. Trigger a chain reaction. Every audit starts with document requests," he said. "Financial trails. Employment logs. Offshore accounts. If those are tampered with..." He paused, letting the silence fill the unspoken answer. "The auditors start digging," I finished. "Exactly. And once they dig, they don't stop." He pulled out a folder, thin, but dense with implications. "These are anonymous tips ready to be sent to the auditors. Nothing explosive yet. Just threads." I opened it. Each page contained a single question. A single suspicion. A single spark. "What do these do?" I asked. "They force Thomas to scramble," he said. "Every question triggers a callback, a refile, a check in, a correction." A small, sharp smile formed at the corner of his mouth. "It's slow. It's subtle. And it will drive him out of his mind." But my mind wasn't on the papers. It was on Aunt Brenda's words echoing in my head. "You're not fighting a man anymore. You're fighting the people who made him." I swallowed. "Marshall, if they're really watching us, if they have access to cameras, how do we make any move without them seeing it?" He looked at the window, then back at me. "We don't." A cold ripple passed through me. "They see everything," he continued. "But that's the point. We use their surveillance against them." I frowned. "I don't understand." He tapped the folder lightly. "They expect you to run. To panic. To fold." He leaned in, voice low. "When you don't. When you move calmly, deliberately, when you act like someone with leverage, they start second-guessing themselves." I felt something pulse in my chest, fear mixing with something dangerously close to resolve. "So we let them watch," I whispered. Marshall nodded once. "Let them watch you build the matchbox while they're sitting in a room full of gasoline." The clock on the wall ticked louder than usual, as if marking the official start of something irreversible. I stood and walked to the window. The street looked normal. Children on bikes. A dog tugging its owner. A jogger sweating through his morning routine. Normal. Yet I could almost feel invisible eyes behind the glass of every parked car. A neighborhood that lived two lives. The one everyone believed in. And the one I'd just been thrust into like a pawn promoted to a target. Marshall spoke softly behind me. "You know, you can still walk away." I kept my eyes on the street. "No, I can't." He sighed. "I figured you'd say that." I turned around. "Because if I walk away," I said, "they win. Thomas wins. And everything my father tried to warn me about dies with him." Marshall stepped closer, just close enough to feel the gravity of the moment. "Then we do this right," he said. "Careful, quiet, strategic." He slid a new document across the table. A timeline. 8 days. Structured. Measured. Deadly. "Today is day 1, he said. "And today we start with something small." I picked it up, scanning the first line. Day 1. Prepare the trigger. I looked up at him. "What does that mean?" He gave me a smile that wasn't quite a smile at all. "It means," he said, "we're going to give your husband a very bad day." The sun had barely crested the horizon when I got to Thomas's office. I had dressed in neutral tones, simple, unassuming, but my nerves were anything but calm. Every step toward that building felt heavier than the last, as though gravity itself knew what was coming. Marshall's plan was in motion. Phase 2 was live. And today, Thomas would take the first hit. I slipped past the receptionist with a polite nod, my badge already flagged for clearance. No one questioned me, not today, not this carefully orchestrated morning. Inside, the office smelled like polished wood and anxiety. Phones rang. Keyboards clicked. And somewhere in the maze of cubicles, I knew Thomas was already awake to the storm heading his way. I stopped at his assistant's desk. She looked up, surprised to see me. "Morning, Madison," she said cautiously. "Everything okay?" I smiled. "Better than okay. Just checking on a few files." She hesitated, then nodded. "All right. Thomas has a meeting at 9. But the rest of the day is clear." "Perfect." I moved into his office and shut the door quietly behind me. The room was immaculate, ordered, controlled, the reflection of Thomas himself. A man who prided himself on every detail. A man who was about to lose control. I set the folder on his desk. Just one folder. Nothing incriminating. But enough to start a chain reaction. I pulled my phone from my pocket and sent a single encrypted message. Phase 2. Live. Almost instantly, my inbox pinged with a confirmation. Trigger accepted. First domino falling. And then I waited. Quiet. Invisible. Watching. The first email hit Thomas at exactly 9:03 a.m. A notification on his screen. He glanced at it. Eyes widening. Heart rate quickening. Not because he recognized me. Not because he expected me. Because he realized he couldn't control it. One message. One domino. And then another. And another. Within 30 minutes, the emails had started pinging all internal departments. Finance, HR, legal. Each one flagged a minor inconsistency. A small discrepancy. A gap in the chain of his perfect empire. Each one invisible to everyone else but glaring to Thomas. I sat back against the wall, letting the scene unfold like a chessboard. And then came the first phone call. "Thomas," his VP's voice trembled. "Sir, there's an issue. The auditors, they flagged something unusual in the accounts. We're not sure how it got through." I could almost hear the gears in Thomas's mind turning. Panic. Pride. Paranoia. Exactly as we planned. Hours passed in a surreal blur. Thomas's face appeared in my mind repeatedly. Each knock of the phone. Each alert on his screen. Ich meine Panitz adding pressure. It was working. And yet, despite the thrill, I couldn't ignore the shadow that lingered behind me. The black sedan. The watchers. They knew. I glanced out the window. Empty street. But eyes, unseen, lingered. Marshall's voice came softly over my earpiece. "Remember. Calm. Let them watch. Every reaction is fuel." I swallowed. Nodded to myself. And watched as Thomas's carefully constructed world began to wobble. If you're still following this. If your heart is racing as mine is. Don't stop now. Hit subscribe before someone like Aunt Brenda sees you paying attention. And if you won't, go into the comments and admit why you'd rather be blind to the chaos around you. Because here's the truth. Dominoes don't fall quietly. And when the next one hits, it will shake everything Thomas thought he owned. By mid-morning, the first tremors were visible across Thomas's empire. I watched from my apartment, laptop open. Heart steady but mind sharp. Emails flagged, calls routed. HR inquiries spiraling into minor chaos. A single folder, my carefully placed domino, was triggering panic across departments. I could see him now. Pacing his corner office via a discreet security camera feed. The man who once stood as a tower of control was now restless. Hands clenched at his temples. Shoulders tight. Eyes scanning every screen like they could swallow the problem whole. Marshall's voice crackled over my earpiece. Phase 2 is unfolding. Don't interfere, let him stumble. I exhaled, focusing on the patterns, the cracks, the exact moment a man's ego would force mistakes. By noon, he had called an emergency board meeting. I listened in, voice disguised, earpiece hidden in my hair. Each word he spoke was defensive, clipped, shaky. Internal audit anomalies are minor temporary errors, he told the board, trying to sound calm. But I assure you, we are correcting them immediately. Mina as? Lies. Because we planted evidence he couldn't ignore, and now it was mounting fast. One VP's voice trembled over a video call. "Sir, we can't justify these corrections without reporting them externally." Thomas's hands gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white. "Do it internally. Do not escalate." A pause. A breath too long. A hesitation I would have killed to witness years ago. I watched him fracture. Not completely, but enough to see the human underneath the armor. The man who humiliated me, who dismissed my worth, who thought he could control every outcome, was human after all. And humans make mistakes when cornered. By mid-afternoon, the press had caught wind of minor financial irregularities. It started small: a single article online, a quiet post on a business blog. Then another. Then a wave. Thomas's phone didn't stop ringing. Calls from lawyers, investors, even distant relatives asking questions he hadn't anticipated. And I watched it all unfold from the safety of my apartment, knowing the perfect chaos we had orchestrated was unfolding like clockwork. Then came the first personal blow. A video clip, silent, sharp, devastating, hit his email. Captured from a camera in the boardroom. Thomas berating a junior executive for a misfiled document. In the video, his anger was disproportionate, cruel. The kind of cruelty no CEO wants the world to see. The clip went viral in minutes. I pressed my fingers against my lips, trying not to smile. But the satisfaction was subtle, almost imperceptible. Years of humiliation. Years of silence. A single folder. And now. Justice in motion. Marshall's voice broke through my thoughts. "They'll try to trace it back to you. Be careful." I nodded, though he couldn't see me. I'd already taken precautions: encrypted connections, untraceable routes, shadows layered upon shadows. Thomas's empire was crumbling quietly, methodically. And yet, as the sun dipped low over Florida's skyline, a shadow of unease crept into me. Because we weren't the only ones watching. Aunt Brenda's presence lingered in my mind. Her warning echoed in my ears. "You're not fighting a man anymore. You're fighting the people who made him." I knew she wasn't bluffing. Thomas was just the first domino. And that's when I saw him. Not Thomas. A figure at the corner of the street. Watching. Silent. Unblinking. If you're still listening, subscribe before the watchers know you're awake. And if you won't, comment why you'd leave yourself blind while the chaos unfolds. Because the next move will hit closer to home than Thomas ever did. The figure didn't move. Not an inch. He stood beneath the street lamp like he had grown out of the pavement itself, a shadow carved into the world just for me to notice. Tall. Still. Arms at his sides. Head slightly tilted, as if he was listening to my fear before I even felt it. I froze at my window. Was he watching the building? Watching me? Or waiting for someone to give him a signal? My pulse hammered against my ribs. I stepped back, letting the curtain fall into place. The room dimmed, but the pressure didn't fade. Whoever he wasn't random. Because a second later, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. One message. "Nice work. He's cracking." My stomach knotted. Not Marshall. Not Rylan. Someone else. Someone who was following the chaos closely enough to comment on it and bold enough to send a message that vague, that intimate. I didn't respond. I wouldn't. I couldn't. Instead, I turned to the laptop again. A new camera feed popped up. Not one of mine. One someone sent to me. Thomas was no longer pacing. He was unraveling. His tee hung loose. His shirt sleeves rolled up roughly, uneven. Hair disheveled like he'd run both hands through it too many times. He slammed a stack of papers onto his desk. Who the hell is doing this to me? Two board members watched him helplessly. Both looked younger than I remembered. Or maybe Thomas looked older. Years older. One cleared his throat. "There are accusations circulating on social media. They're spreading too quickly. We need a statement." Thomas spun on him. A statement? A statement for what? Baseless rumors? One video of me disciplining an employee. My father built this company from nothing, and now I'm expected to apologize because a handful of interns got emotional. His voice rose until the camera mic distorted. The older board member spoke up, voice trembling but firm. "This isn't about interns anymore. Investors are contacting the SEC. Thomas stopped breathing. I saw it. His chest froze mid-rise. A long, dangerous silence filled the room. Finally, he whispered. Who tipped them off? The men exchanged glances. We don't know. It wasn't internal. Thomas's jaw tightened. Internal? He was right about that part. Because I wasn't internal anymore. The text notification ticked again. Same number. Don't worry, he won't find you yet. My mouth dried instantly. Yet. The word gnawed at me like teeth. Whoever this was, they weren't on my side. They weren't on Thomas's side either. They were playing a longer game. And I was just a piece on the board. I blocked the number. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't matter. People who send messages like that don't need a working number to reach you again. Marshall patched into the line again. Turn on channel not. I grabbed the remote with shaking fingers, flicked on the TV. There it was. Breaking news. CEO Thomas Caldwell faces internal turmoil. Possible investor fallout. A reporter stood outside his headquarters, microphone in hand, hair whipping in the Florida breeze. Sources confirm unexpected disruptions within the Caldwell Corporation, including unverified allegations of financial mismanagement and leaked footage of inappropriate workplace conduct. My breath hitched. They were fast. Faster than we expected. Marshall whistled softly in my ear. Well, that escalated beautifully. I clenched my jaw. It's too fast. Something's off. Who leaked the video publicly? That wasn't us. Silence from his end. A silence I didn't like. Then. You're right. 3 words. No humor. No ease. Just gravity. That wasn't us, he repeated. Cold crept into my spine. If we didn't leak the video, who did? The camera feed switched again, another angle inside the conference room. The board members had regrouped. Thomas stood apart, arms crossed tightly, eyes dark with fury. The chairwoman spoke softly. We need to consider temporary suspension until the situation can be evaluated. Thomas laughed. Not a happy laugh. A laugh with a razor edge. You think you can run this company without me, he snapped. You think anyone can replace me? But the board wasn't looking at him with fear anymore. They were looking at him with disappointment. Maybe even suspicion. The chairwoman cleared her throat. All those in favor. Hands rose. Not 1. Not 2. All but 1. Thomas stared at them like he didn't recognize their faces. His voice cracked. You're making a mistake. You're all making a huge mistake. He looked hollowed out. Defeated. Almost. Scared. And for one fleeting second, I didn't feel victorious. I felt the weight of what revenge really does. How it strips both sides. How it empties the heart even when it fills the scorecard. But the moment passed. Because he made his choice long before I made mine. Then. The feed glitched. Static swallowed the screen. Lines tore through the image. A distorted figure flickered in the corner. Not Thomas. Not the board. Someone behind the camera. Someone stepping into view, face blurred, but presence unmistakable. They raised a hand, and pressed a single finger to their lips. A silent request. Or warning. Don't speak. The feed cut completely. And somewhere in the hallway, outside my apartment, a floorboard creaked. If you're still watching, don't lose your nerve now. Subscribe because the people who are walking toward my door aren't bluffing. And if you're too scared to subscribe, then comment and explain why you choose silence while danger breathes down your neck. Because the past wasn't done with me yet. And neither were the shadows following me. The storm rolled in long before the rain started. Florida skies darkened in slow. Heavy layers blew to gray, gray to iron. A thick wind pressed against my windows like it carried a warning. The kind you don't need words to understand. Inside my apartment, every light was off except the glow of my laptop. The city hummed in the distance, but inside, it was silent, too silent. Marshall's last text still sat at the top of my screen. Stay inside. Don't engage with anyone you don't know. Phase 3 starts tonight. I read the message again, the weight sinking deeper. Thomas's empire wasn't unraveling, it was accelerating into collapse. And tonight was the first night he would truly feel it. Around 7 p.m., a notification pinged. A familiar one. Board meeting, emergency session. Encrypted link. Anonymous sender. My pulse tightened as I clicked in. The boardroom appeared. Dim, tension thick enough to taste. Executives whispered among themselves fractured sentences. Restless energy, anxiety etched into their posture. Then Thomas walked in. Not the polished CEO who graced magazines. Not the arrogant man who belittled me in front of colleagues. But a man unraveling under his own weight. Hair disheveled. Loosened. Eyes bloodshot. Hands trembling ever so slightly as he dropped a stack of papers onto the table. He didn't speak for several seconds. He just stood there, swallowing something heavy, fear, pride, maybe both. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked. We're under investigation. No one breathed. Even through the screen, I felt the air freeze. Regulatory bodies want documentation. Full transparency. Immediate access to files, internal communications, audit trails. He paused, jaw flexing. They think someone inside is sabotaging us. Someone. Not me. Not in his worst nightmares would he imagine I could orchestrate something of this scale. One board member cleared her throat. Thomas, the leaked footage or treatment of staff, reporters are picking it apart. Investors are panicking. His glare could have burned through glass. That's being handled. But even he didn't sound convinced. I leaned closer, watching every micro-expression, every twitch of frustration. Every time he blinked too long, I could see it. The storm inside him was worse than the one outside my window. Then something shifted. A man from legal slid a folder across the table. Slow. Careful. As if it held explosives. Thomas, this came in an hour ago. The CEO hesitated. Opened it. Stopped breathing. Because inside were documents once I had arranged to surface. All legitimate looking. All pointing to him approving questionable transactions. All tied directly to accounts he didn't recognize. He slammed the folder shut. Forgery. Someone's framing me. Maybe. Another board member said quietly. But the regulators won't care until they find the source. Silence again. Longer this time. Heavier. Then something strange happened. Something unexpected. Thomas exhaled and whispered, almost to himself. Someone wants to destroy me. There was no outrage in his tone. No disbelief. Just acceptance. Resignation. A man finally understanding he wasn't invincible. And for the first time since this entire revenge began, my chest tightened with an emotion I didn't expect. Pity. Not forgiveness. Not sympathy. Just pity. Because I knew what it felt like to realize your world could collapse without warning. I'd lived it. He was living it now. The meeting ended abruptly as he dismissed everyone. He stayed behind alone, shoulders slumped, staring at his reflection in the darkened window. I watched him. He never looked smaller. Then, a flicker. Movement. In the reflection behind him. A shadow crossing the boardroom doorway. Tall. Slow. Intentional. Thomas didn't notice. But I did. And my blood ran cold. Someone was watching him. Someone else involved. Someone who wasn't part of my plan. And whoever they weren't afraid of being seen. If you're still listening, hit subscribe. Because the next chapter exposes the first real threat neither Thomas nor I were prepared for. And if you skip, then say in the comments why you'd risk missing the moment the puppet strings snap. Thomas never saw the shadow behind him. But I did. On my screen, the boardroom lights flickered for half a second, just enough to distort the image, to stretch the figure's silhouette before the feed stabilized again. Tall. Broad shoulders. Slow, deliberate steps toward the doorway. Not security. Not an assistant. Not anyone who belonged there after hours. I straightened in my chair, heart tight. This wasn't part of Marshall's plan. And that alone made my stomach drop. Thomas finally moved. He walked to the window, exhaling as if he'd aged 10 years in one afternoon. The storm outside cast streaks of lightning across the glass, illuminating half his face, tired eyes, clenched jaw, desperation leaking through the cracks. In the reflection, the shadow paused. Watching him. Like a predator studying prey. My breathing slowed to match the tension in the room. Thomas rubbed his forehead, unaware he was no longer alone. Then, The boardroom door creaked open. Barely. Just enough for a whisper of darkness to slip inside. I sat frozen, staring as the figure stepped forward. They didn't move with hesitation. They moved like someone who had every right to be there. Someone who belonged in that kind of power. Someone who wasn't afraid of Thomas Walker. A chill ran down my spine. Because the voice that finally broke the silence didn't belong to Thomas. It came from the shadow. Low. Smooth. Calculated. You've lost control, Thomas. Thomas spun, startled. What? Who are you? This is a private. Nothing is private when money is bleeding, the figure interrupted calmly, stepping into the light. And that's when I saw him clearly for the first time. Older. Sharp jaw. Silver hair combed neatly back. Black suit tailored to perfection. Eyes cold, observant, hungry. He looked like the kind of man who didn't raise his voice because he'd learned long ago he didn't need to. A man used to obedience. A man used to fear. Thomas's posture shifted instantly from frustrated CEO to cornered animal. Mr. Donovan? He stammered. That name hit me like a slap. Donovan. The Donovan. The silent partner. The invisible financier. The man who whispered in shadows and made kings kneel. The one Aunt Brenda warned me about without saying his name. The one person Thomas feared. Mr. Donovan stepped closer. You're slipping, he said. His voice didn't rise. It sharpened. Thomas swallowed. Sir, everything is under control. The audit issues are exaggerated, just internal inconsistencies. Inconsistencies. Donovan repeated, as if tasting the word. Funny. Because regulators don't open investigations over inconsistencies. They open them when someone inside wants you destroyed. My blood chilled. He knew. Not about me, not yet. But he knew someone was pulling strings. And Thomas, to my surprise, didn't argue. He just looked down, shoulders sagging. Whoever is doing this, I'll find them, I promise. Donovan's jaw tightened. See that you do. Because if your house burns, everything tied to you burns with it. A lightning flash lit up the room so bright the entire boardroom glowed. For a brief second, Donovan's shadow stretched long behind him like something out of a nightmare. Then the lights steadied. Donovan stepped closer, lowering his voice. One more thing. Thomas didn't move. Didn't breathe. Your wife? Donovan said softly. Too softly. My heart stopped. Thomas stiffened. What about her? Donovan smirked. A man only loses focus this badly when a woman is involved. Fix your home, Thomas. Before your home ruins you. I gripped the edges of my chair. He didn't know it was me. But he knew someone mattered. Someone close enough to wound Thomas's pride. Someone close enough to destabilize him. Donovan wasn't guessing. He was profiling. And he was good at it. Thomas whispered. She's gone. Donovan raised one eyebrow. Find her. Or find whoever she went to. Pause. Loose ends terrify me. Then he walked out, leaving Thomas alone, small, shaken, cornered. The door shut. And the storm outside thundered in approval. That night, I realized something. My enemy wasn't just Thomas anymore. It was the man behind him. The man with deeper pockets. Sharper instincts. Colder eyes. A man who didn't need revenge stories. He wrote them. If you're still listening, you should subscribe. Because the storm that's coming doesn't spare bystanders. And if you won't? Then write in the comments why you'd walk into chapter 11 blind. When Donovan is already watching. The next morning, the Florida sun felt wrong. Not warm. Not comforting. It glared like an interrogation lamp, harsh and exposing. I sat on the edge of my bed, laptop open, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Marshall hadn't responded since last night. Rylan hadn't called. And somewhere in the distance, Donovan's presence lingered like smoke you can't shake off. I felt watched. Not just in my apartment. Everywhere. Because someone with that kind of power doesn't just appear. They infiltrate. They observe. They wait. The first message came quietly. Encrypted. She knows too much. Phase 4 begins. No name. No sender. Just the words. And the timestamp, 6:03 a.m. My chest tightened. I leaned back, eyes scanning the room. The blinds. The door. Every shadow. Phase 4. I had hoped Phase 3 was the worst. I had hoped last night was the climax. But now. Someone had escalated. I called Marshall. No answer. Texted. No reply. Rylan finally called, voice sharp, clipped. They know where you are. Not someone. They. I pressed my hands to my face. How had it escalated so fast? I had planned carefully. Executed perfectly. And yet. The hunters were already one step ahead. Rylan's voice broke through my panic. You need to move. Now. Where? I demanded. Anywhere, everywhere, don't stop, just go. I grabbed the folder. The laptop. Hard drives. Cash. Passports. Every item I'd considered unnecessary before now felt vital. Like armor against a storm I couldn't see yet. As I shoved things into a small, black duffel bag, the phone buzzed again. Another message. She's closer than you think. Don't leave traces. I froze. Read it 3 times. Shoved the phone into my pocket. Someone was inside my network. Inside my security perimeter. Watching my every move. Every step I planned, every route I took, every call I made. It wasn't safe. Not anymore. And I realized. I wasn't just fleeing Thomas. I was running from Donovan. From everyone he touched. From shadows with enough money and power to erase people like me. Rylan led me to a nondescript car outside. Black. Window tints. Silent engine. He didn't speak. Just drove. Through alleys. Side streets. Under bridges. And with every turn, every obscure shortcut, I felt the noose tighten. Somewhere in Miami, I saw them. A black SUV shadowing ours. Distant, at first. Then closer. Mirroring every move. They were good. Better than us. We reached the safe house just before noon. Secluded. Windows boarded. Security cameras everywhere. A bunker disguised as a small office. I exhaled, though the tension in my shoulders didn't release. Because I knew, safe wasn't permanent. Not with Donovan in play. Rylan handed me a folder. Inside. Blueprints of Thomas's headquarters, surveillance routes, financial maps, contacts. Use this wisely, he said, voice low. Phase 4 isn't just about running. It's about strategy. You can't hide forever. For the first time, I understood the full weight of what I'd done. I hadn't just struck at Thomas. I'd entered a world of predators. And I was prey. Later that night, as I reviewed the documents, the lights flickered. Not the storm. Not a power surge. Someone touched the breaker box outside my door. I froze. A voice whispered through the shadows. End of the line, Miss Parker. If you're still watching, subscribe now. Because what happens next will put everything we've built, everything I've fought for, at risk. And if you won't? Leave a comment explaining why you'd stay still while danger waits in the dark. The lights snapped off. Not a flicker. Not a stutter. A kill switch. Sharp. Intentional. Silent. My heart lunged into my throat. Rylan moved instantly, grabbing my arm and pulling me deeper into the safe house. He didn't whisper. He didn't panic. He acted like a soldier who'd trained for this exact moment. Stay behind me, he breathed. A thin beam of light from his phone illuminated only the floor, never the walls, never the windows. It wasn't meant to help us see. It was meant to keep us hidden. Outside, gravel crunched. Slow steps. Measured. Confident. Not burglars. Not random street muscle. Someone who knew this safe house. Someone who knew I was in it. The breaker box outside clicked again. Once. Twice. Like someone checking the teeth of a trap. My breath fogged in the cold air. The silence deepened, thick enough to feel against my skin. Then. A whisper. Too close. Rylan, open the door. It wasn't a demand. It wasn't shouted. It was spoken softly, like a reminder of an old debt. A man of shadows calling in a favor. Rylan stiffened beside me, his breath catching for a fraction of a second. That one reaction terrified me more than any gunshot could. Donovan. He muttered under his breath. Barely audible. Barely controlled. My stomach dropped. Donovan wasn't outside. He was at the door. Rylan raised his weapon. Aimed toward the entrance. Spoke with a voice I'd never heard before, low, cold, bitten by fury. "You're not stepping inside." A soft laugh drifted through the crack at the bottom of the door. "Still loyal," Donovan said. "Even now." The doorknob jiggled slowly. Almost playfully. Rylan tightened his grip. "Back away," he ordered. "This is your only warning." "Warning?" Donovan chuckled again. No, I'm not here to shoot your asset. I'm here to retrieve her." "You know why." "Asset. Not woman. Not name. Not person. Asset. A thing. Something valuable. Something hunted." I swallowed hard, backing up until my spine touched the cold cement wall. Rylan shifted. Blocking me with his body. "Over my dead body," he said. "And you know I mean that." Outside, the footsteps stopped. A heavy exhale followed. Then Donovan's voice, cool, calculated, dripping with power. "Then I suppose we're finally enemies." Rylan flinched. Not in fear. But in recognition. There was history there. Complicated. Dangerous. A story I wasn't ready to hear yet. The doorknob turned sharply. Once. Twice. 3 times. Metal strained. Wood creaked. Something sharp scraped against the frame, like a tool being inserted. Rylan shoved a heavy metal bar into place. Bolted it. Then pushed me toward the back of the room. "Down the hallway," he whispered. "Emergency exit, don't wait for me." "No," I said, voice trembling but firm. "I'm not leaving you. You don't have a choice." Outside, Donovan's tone sharpened. No more fake pleasantry, no more soft cadence. "Rylan. Move away from the door. Now." A beat of silence. Then. Boom. The entire door shook on its hinges. My knees buckled. Rylan grabbed my shoulders and forced me backward. "Go. Now." I stumbled, backing into the narrow hall. Concrete walls. Emergency strip lighting that barely glowed. The air tasted metallic, like fear. Another boom. Wood cracking. Metal bending. Donovan wasn't knocking anymore. He was coming in. As I reached the emergency exit, I glanced back. Just in time to see the door splinter inward, a piece of the frame shooting across the room like a javelin. Rylan didn't hesitate. He fired. Twice. The muzzle flash carved bright scars through the darkness. A shout followed. Whether pain or anger, I couldn't tell. Then Donovan's voice, quiet, livid. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." Rylan yelled over his shoulder. "Run! Don't stop." So I ran. My feet pounded across the concrete floor. My lungs burned with cold air. My heart hammered in panic. Behind me. More gunshots. Footsteps. Yelling. Furniture shattering. A fight exploding in the small room like a storm ripping apart a house. I reached the exit. Grabbed the cold metal bar. And shoved it open. Florida night air blasted against my skin. I sprinted into the darkness. I didn't look back. But as I disappeared into the night, a single thought tore through me. If Donovan entered the safe house? Did Rylan make it out? If you're still with me, still gripping your screen or your seat, hit subscribe. Because the next chapter answers what happened inside that safe house. And if you choose not to, tell me in the comments why you would look away when a man's life hangs between shadows and gunfire. The night air hit me like ice. Not the refreshing Florida breeze I'd known. No, this was cold. Sharp, dangerous. It carried the smell of wet asphalt, burning rubber, and something else I couldn't place: fear. My legs burned as I ran down the alley behind the safe house. Every shadow stretched long, twisting against the dim street lights. Every sound: footsteps, the distant thrum of a car engine, the rustle of leaves, made me flinch. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know who was following. I only knew I had to keep moving. Rylan had disappeared in the chaos. I didn't know if he'd made it out. I didn't know if he'd even survived the breach. And somewhere deep inside, that uncertainty gnawed at me like fire eating through paper. I ducked behind a dumpster, chest heaving, and tried to catch my breath. My palms were raw from gripping the folder, my nails digging into the edges like talons. The weight of the documents, Thomas's empire, my father's secrets pressed against me more heavily than the duffel bag ever could. I realized, in that moment, something terrifying. I wasn't just running from Donovan, or from Thomas. I was running from everything I'd ever known. From everyone I thought I could trust. A sound, soft, deliberate, came from the shadows behind me. A voice I didn't recognize. Low. Calm. Controlled. You shouldn't be out here alone. I whipped around. A figure stepped from the alleyway. Tall. Lean. Eyes hidden under the brim of a hat. Hands empty, but confident. I froze. Who are you? I asked, my voice breaking. The figure didn't answer immediately. Instead, he extended a hand. Not threatening. Not accusatory. Inviting. Name's Elias, he said finally. And you're not going to survive tonight without help. I didn't know if I should trust him. Every instinct screamed danger. Every story I'd lived screamed don't follow strangers in the dark. But something in his calm demeanor, something in the way he moved through the shadows as if he belonged there, made me nod. I didn't have a choice. Not anymore. We moved quickly. Down deserted streets. Through narrow alleys. Under bridges. Elias never questioned me. Never asked about the folder. He just moved like a ghost, silent and efficient. And I began to realize. He knew the city like the back of his hand. Every shortcut, every hidden passage, every blind corner. For the first time that night, I felt protected. Even if only a little. As we paused behind a brick wall, catching our breath, I dared a look over my shoulder. Headlights. Black SUVs. Too many to count. And they weren't just searching. They were hunting. I swallowed, teeth clenched. Donovan's reach was larger than I'd imagined. More coordinated. More ruthless. Elias glanced at me, expression unreadable. They're close, he said softly. And they know you're not alone anymore. I shivered, realizing that no matter how fast we ran, no matter where we hid, Donovan had eyes everywhere. And that made one thing painfully clear. Tonight, there would be no mistakes. He leaned closer, voice low, almost a whisper. You need to make a choice, Miss Parker. Do we keep running, or do we fight back? My heart stopped. If you're still listening, subscribe now because the decision I make in the next chapter will change everything. And if you won't, leave a comment explaining why you'd hide while the storm closes in. We didn't have time to think. As soon as Elias and I rounded the corner, headlights pierced the alley behind us. Black SUVs. Engines growling like predators. Too many to count. Too close. They were coming for me and they didn't hesitate. Elias grabbed my arm and yanked me into a narrow side passage. Move, he hissed. His voice was calm. But I felt the urgency in every syllable. I stumbled after him, heart hammering. Every step echoed like a gunshot in the tight corridor. Concrete walls pressed against my shoulders. The world outside was chaos, flashing lights, shouts, screeching tires. And then bang. The first shot rang out. Too close. Ricocheting off the walls. Elias pushed me down, covering me with his body. Stay low, he shouted. I pressed my face into his chest, trying to control my panic, trying to breathe without making a sound. I peeked cautiously from behind his shoulder. Two men masked, armed, moving methodically down the alley. They weren't panicked. They weren't sloppy. They were professionals. One of them scanned the shadows. And then? Froze. Targets here, he hissed into a radio. A brief pause. Move in. Now. My stomach turned to lead. I realized something horrifying. This wasn't random. This wasn't just an attempt to scare me. They knew exactly where I was. Exactly how to flush me out. And for the first time, I understood something Marshall had warned me about but I'd ignored. We were cornered. Elias acted before I could process fear. He lunged from the shadows. A swift, precise movement. He disarmed the first man before he could react. A punch. A kick. A grunt. The man went down hard. The second man turned. Gun raised. Elias tackled him to the ground. I scrambled backward, clutching the folder, heart hammering. The sounds of the scuffle, grunts, thuds, The metallic clang of weapon against concrete echoed in the narrow passage. And then I heard it. A voice. Low. Calm. Unshakable. Miss Parker. Donovan. He stepped out from the shadows at the alley's mouth. Hands in his pockets. No weapon drawn. Yet more terrifying than any gun. Let them go, he said softly. The men at Elias's feet froze. The fight halted mid-strike. Even Elias stepped back slightly. Donovan's gaze locked on me. Piercing. Unrelenting. Like he could see every thought, every plan, every fear. I can take everything from you tonight. Donovan continued, voice calm, deadly. Everything your father built. Everything you've tried to protect. Everything that matters to you. I felt the folder burn against my chest. I wanted to hide. I wanted to run. But I couldn't. He took a step closer. Or, he said slowly, deliberately. You can hand it over. And maybe, survive the night. He swallowed hard. Every instinct screamed no. Every muscle in my body tensed. And yet something inside me snapped. I wouldn't let him intimidate me. I wouldn't let him win. Not tonight. Before I could act, Donovan raised one hand. The men behind him froze in anticipation. And then he smiled. Not cruelly. Not kindly. But in a way that made my blood run cold. Decede quickly, Miss Parker, he said. Because patience is a luxury you no longer have. If you're still watching, subscribe now because the next choice I make will ignite a chain reaction Donovan never expected. And if you won't? Tell me in the comments why you'd step aside while your entire life teeters on the edge. He didn't move. Not because I was paralyzed. Not because I was afraid. Because every instinct screamed that one wrong step would cost me everything. Donovan's smile didn't waver. His eyes cold, calculating, unnerving locked on mine. It was like staring down the storm itself. And I realized, sharply, that storms could destroy or reshape everything in their path. I had to act. But how? I glanced at Elias. He wasn't moving. Not because he couldn't. Because he knew I had to decide this. Not him. Me. My hands tightened on the folder. Every secret my father had protected, every legal document, every financial blueprint, it was all mine to wield. All mine to lose. And Donovan knew it. He wasn't just a man. He was a weapon. A predator that thrived on fear. But I wasn't prey anymore. I exhaled. Slowly. Deliberately. This ends tonight. Donovan's voice cut through the alley. So, what will it be? His words dripped with amusement, like a cat toying with a trapped mouse. Hand it over, walk away. Live another day. Or fight, and see how quickly you disappear. I couldn't run. I couldn't hide. And I sure as hell wouldn't give up. I won't hand it over, I said, voice shaking but firm. You'll have to take it from me. Donovan smilavidened. A predator's grin. I was hoping you'd say that. Before I could react further, the men behind Donovan lunged. All at once. Trained, coordinated, and terrifyingly fast. Elias stepped forward. A blur of motion. He deflected, parried, and struck, using precise movements that made my stomach tighten. I ducked behind a stack of crates, folder clutched to my chest. Bullets pinged against metal. Concrete dust filled the alley. The air reeked of ozone and sweat. I realized in that moment this wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a chess match. Every move calculated. Every second mattered. From my cover, I watched Donovan. He didn't fire. He didn't flinch. He watched. And I understood something terrifying. He didn't need to move to control the fight. His presence alone dictated the outcome. I had underestimated him. And underestimation could get me killed. But I wasn't going to underestimate myself. Not again. A sudden bang echoed behind me. Concrete shattered. The folder slipped from my hands, skidding across the ground. Donovan's shadow fell over it. If you're still watching, hit subscribe. Because the next moments will decide everything. And if you won't? Leave a comment explaining why you'd watch someone else fight for their life while you stay on the sidelines. The folder lay on the ground. A simple piece of paper. Every secret, every inheritance. Every truth about my father. and Donovan's shadow stretched over it like a storm cloud ready to strike. I couldn't let him have it. I dove forward, snatching it from the ground, heart hammering. Elias blocked a punch from one of Donovan's men as I scrambled behind him. The alley erupted into chaos. Fists, weapons, shouts, and the metallic ping of bullets ricocheting off walls. Concrete dust choked the air. Every second felt like an hour. Through the chaos, Donovan stepped forward. Calm. Controlled. Untouchable. You can fight all you want, he said, voice low and dangerous. But you won't win. Not tonight. I shook my head, breathless. You've underestimated me before. Don't make the same mistake again. He smiled sharp, predatory. You're stubborn. I like that. But stubbornness won't save you from what's coming. I realized then that this wasn't just about survival. It was about sending a message. And I was no longer a pawn. Elias moved like a shadow, deflecting blows, disarming attackers, keeping me alive. I clutched the folder, heart racing, mind spinning. A man lunged at me. I sidestepped, barely, and he crashed into a pile of crates. Wood splintered. Metal clanged. I heard Donovan's calm, precise commands. Even in the chaos, he orchestrated every move. He was in control. And yet, I had something he didn't expect. I took a deep breath. A decision. A risk. I yelled. Voice cutting through the chaos. Donovan, look at me. Every man froze. Elias glanced at me, puzzled. Donovan's head tilted slightly. I wasn't baiting him. I was making a choice. One bold enough to shift the entire fight. I stepped forward, folder held high. Everything you want, I shouted, you can have. But only if you answer one question first. Donovan's smile faltered. Curiosity flashed across his face, a crack in the ice. I swallowed. Voice trembling but steady. What do you want from my father's legacy? What are you really after? Donovan's expression darkened. A shadow passed over his features. He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time. You think it's about your father? He said quietly. Wrong. It's always been about you. Every move, every attack, every threat. It wasn't about inheritance. It was personal. I staggered back, trying to process the truth. Elias caught me, steadying me. Donovan continued, calm but deadly. You survived my traps. You survived the chaos. But the question is, will you survive knowing why I've done this? Time froze. The alley held its breath. Even the chaos paused in anticipation. I gripped the folder tighter, realizing the danger wasn't just outside, it was inside the story I'd never fully understood. If you're still here, subscribe now. Because the answer to Donovan's question will change everything. And if you won't, leave a comment explaining why you'd stand still while your life hangs in the balance. Silence. The fight had stopped, not because anyone surrendered, but because the air itself seemed to hold its breath. Donovan's gaze didn't leave mine. It pierced me. It stripped me down to raw fear and raw defiance all at once. I realized something chilling. The danger wasn't just in bullets or fists. It was in knowledge. In secrets. In the truth that had been hidden from me all my life. Donovan's voice was almost gentle now. Deadly calm, but the weight behind it made my knees weaken. You've been chasing shadows, Miss Parker. Running from enemies you thought were outside. But the real betrayal, the real threat, has been closer than you imagined. My mind spun. Closer? Closer how? He took a slow step forward. Every man in the alley froze, weapons still raised. Even Elias stopped, watching silently, alert but uncertain. You think your father's empire is what I want? Donovan continued. You think this folder, these papers hold power. But it's never been about power. It's about legacy. And the mistakes of those who came before you. I realized the words were not just carefully chosen. They were personal. Donovan's is narovet. I knew your father better than anyone. I knew the choices he made. The debts he left unpaid. The people he thought he could trust. And you've been running into the same trap. Thinking you could escape it. Every memory of the past, every secret meeting, every late-night whisper, every threat suddenly made sense. Donovan wasn't just hunting me. He was exposing the lie of my life. He tilted his head, almost pitying. You've been betrayed before you even knew it. And the ones you trusted most are the ones who set this trap for you. I pressed the folder to my chest. My father. Aunt Brenda. All the people I thought were on my side. The people I loved, the people I depended on, had been working against me all along. The truth hit like a punch to the gut. And suddenly, I understood. Survival wasn't enough anymore. I needed answers. I needed to reclaim what was stolen. I needed to strike back. Donovan stepped closer, voice low, almost a whisper. Do you understand now, Miss Parker? Every move you've made, every life you've touched, was leading here. And now you have to decide. Will you continue to run, or will you finally face what's waiting for you? If you're still watching, subscribe now. Because the next chapter reveals the full betrayal and the first step toward revenge. And if you won't, tell me in the comments why you'd ignore the truth when it's staring you in the face. The weight of Donovan's words sank into me like lead. Every betrayal, every lie, every carefully hidden truth, it all came crashing down at once. Aunt Brenda. My father's closest confidants. Even people I had considered allies, they had all played a part. And suddenly, the chaos, the attacks, the near-death chases, they weren't random. They were orchestrated. They were deliberate. And I had walked right into it. Donovan's gaze didn't waver. I've watched you flail, he said calmly, almost coldly. Your father's empire was never secure. He trusted the wrong people. And those who were loyal, well, some were loyal to the wrong cause. I felt my stomach twist. Everything I'd believed about my family, about my father, about who I could trust, was a lie. He stepped closer. Your aunt wanted the folder not for loyalty, but for herself. She wanted the secrets for leverage, for power, for revenge on those she felt wronged her. I remembered the screams in the alley, the chaos, the moments of pure terror, all pointing back to her. She wasn't protecting me. She was trying to steal everything. I pressed the folder tighter to my chest. For the first time that night, clarity hit me. Fear didn't control me anymore. Pain didn't control me anymore. Anger didn't control me. But it fueled me. I realized then. Survival wasn't enough. I needed justice. I needed revenge. I needed to take control of everything that had been stolen from me. And most importantly, I needed to show them all that I wasn't weak. That I couldn't be broken. I looked at Donovan. His expression was unreadable. But in that moment, I didn't care if he was a threat or a guide. Fine, I said, voice steady despite the adrenaline. I understand. I see the betrayal. And I'm done running. Elias gave me a questioning glance. I nodded. He understood this was no longer just survival. This was a war of truth, a reclamation of what was mine. Donovan smiled faintly, not cruelly, but knowingly. You've finally realized, he said. And now, the real game begins. The air thickened. Shadows deepened in the alley. Even the distant sounds of the city seemed to hush. If you're still here, subscribe now. Because what happens next will set the stage for the final act of reckoning. And if you won't, comment below why you'd let a life built on lies go unchallenged. The night air was thick with tension. Every shadow seemed alive, every distant sound a threat. But I wasn't afraid anymore, not like before. Not after Donovan's revelation. I clutched the folder tightly, knowing that within its pages lay the leverage I needed. This wasn't about running. This was about taking back everything that had been stolen. Elias stayed close, silent but watchful. He didn't question my plan. He understood that the time for hesitation was over. I spread the documents on a worn table in a safe, dimly lit room Donovan had prepared. Every page, every number, every contract was a key. And I realized something. My father's empire was vulnerable, but only if I moved smart, fast, and precise. They had underestimated me. They had assumed fear would control me. They had assumed ignorance would keep me compliant. They were wrong. The first strike had to be calculated. Not a random act of revenge, precision. I had to hit Aunt Brenda first. Her greed had been the catalyst for everything. She had orchestrated chaos in the shadows, hidden behind her smile, pretending loyalty. She had underestimated me, my resolve, my intelligence, my willingness to reclaim what was mine. And I would prove her wrong. Donovan, surprisingly, guided me quietly. You know her habits, he said softly. You know where she hides her assets. Where she feels safe. Where she thinks no one can touch her. I nodded, absorbing every word. Every detail mattered. Every moment mattered. The plan was simple on paper: lure her into a position where she thought she was in control, and then strike. But the simplicity was deceptive. The first move would set the tone for everything that followed. I held the folder against my chest, a surge of adrenaline rushing through me. Everything depended on the next hour. If you're still here, subscribe now. Because what I do next will shift the balance of power forever. And if you won't, tell me in the comments why you'd let betrayal go unanswered while your life hangs in the balance. The storm broke just after midnight. Not the kind with lightning. The kind made of decisions you can't take back. This was my moment. The first real move. The beginning of the end for everyone who thought I would stay silent, stay small, stay scared. Not anymore. We arrived at the waterfront district just after 1 a.m. Empty streets. Salt in the air. The distant hum of boats shifting against the docks. Aunt Brenda's private accounting office sat in a renovated warehouse, tucked behind luxury yachts and old fishing vessels. She'd always been obsessed with pretending she was bigger, richer, more powerful than she actually was. Ironic, really. She had no idea I now owned everything she worshipped. Elias walked a few steps ahead, scanning the area, his movements sharp, deliberate. Donovan stayed behind me, not touching, but close enough that I felt the weight of his presence. This wasn't just about taking something from her. This was about ending her control over my life. Her fear tactics. Her lies. Her claws in everything my father built. Tonight, they'd break. The office lights were still on. Typical Brenda, she never slept, only schemed. Her empire was built on greed, intimidation, and backroom deals she assumed no one would ever uncover. I stepped toward the door. My palm hovered over the handle. Elias stopped me gently. Let me go first. I nodded. He cracked the door open and slipped inside like a ghost. Seconds passed. Silent. Still. Then he whispered. All clear. I entered. The smell of expensive perfume hit me instantly. Lavender. Overpowering. Cheap and desperate, despite the brand label. The space was immaculate, too immaculate. Neat stacks of papers. A glowing laptop. A glass of wine half finished. She had been here recently. Maybe she still was. My fingers tightened around the folder. It felt warm, alive, like it understood what I was about to do. Donovan closed the blinds. Elias locked the door. I placed the folder on the her glass desk, and slowly opened it. The pages spilled out like confessions. Secret accounts. Fraudulent transfers. Offshore assets. Payments made to the people who attacked us. Her signature on every page. My father had known. He had known everything. And he kept it all hidden until now. Until I was ready. Until he could trust me to face the truth. I swallowed back the burn behind my eyes. This wasn't the time for tears. This was the time for justice. I took out my phone, opened the secure server Donovan gave me, and began uploading every document. One by one. Line by line. Evidence of a betrayal so deep it hollowed out the truth of my childhood. Elias stood near the door, listening for movement. Donovan watched me, but didn't speak. He didn't need to. He understood that this right here was the moment I shifted from hunted to hunter. From prey to predator. The last file finished uploading. I exhaled. A slow, relieved breath. But then the office door rattled. Tre laudnox. Too intentional. Too controlled. Elias tensed, hand already on his weapon. My pulse spiked. Whoever was out there, knew. Knew I was inside. Knew I had found the evidence. Knew I was finally fighting back. Donovan motioned for silence. The knocking stopped. Then a voice slid through the door like a blade. Open up, sweetheart. Aunt Brenda. Calm. Amused. Mocking. She knew. She knew I was in her private sanctuary. She knew I wasn't afraid anymore. She also knew I had something she couldn't afford to lose. She didn't come here alone. She never comes alone. Elias mouthed. We need to leave. Now. But before we could, the side window shattered. A metal cylinder crashed to the floor, rolling toward my feet. Gas hissed out, white and choking. My heart seized. Donovan shouted, "Move." The room filled with smoke as footsteps raced toward the broken window. A shadow climbed through. No time. No thinking. No second chances. If you're still here, if you haven't clicked away, you need to subscribe. Because the people kicking in this door, they didn't come to threaten me. They came to take me. And if you won't subscribe, go into the comments and tell me why you'd walk away. While I'm gasping for breath and running out of time. Because here's what happened next. The first figure stepped fully into the smoke. And I recognized the silhouette. Not Brenda. Someone worse. Someone I never thought I'd see again. Someone who wasn't supposed to be alive. Smoke and shadows. That was all the room seemed to hold. Every breath I took burned my lungs. Every heartbeat thudded in my ears like a warning drum. Every instinct screamed, "This is it. This is the end or the beginning." I pressed the folder to my chest, the documents still intact. I would not let them take it. Not now. Not ever. The shadow that stepped through the broken window made my blood run cold. Tall. Broad. Movements controlled. And impossibly familiar. It was my father's former business partner, Victor Kane. Presumed dead years ago. The man who betrayed my father, disappeared, and left a trail of destruction in his wake. He smirked in the dim light. "You always were clever, Miss Parker," he said, voice smooth, venomous. Clever, but not enough. Elias stiffened beside me. Donovan's AS naroved. The tension in the room became almost unbearable. This was the enemy we hadn't expected. Not Brenda. Not Donovan. Victor Kane. Victor stepped closer. The gas hissed around us. Burning eyes and throats. But he didn't move. I wouldn't run. He had haunted my family's legacy. He had manipulated, lied, and orchestrated chaos from the shadows. Tonight, I would no longer be a pawn. I met his gaze. "Your time is over," I said, voice trembling but resolute. "You've taken enough." He laughed. A sound that cut like glass. "You, take me down? You've survived bullets, betrayal, and lies, and you still think you can stop me?" I didn't answer. Action spoke louder than words. Donovan whispered, low, urgent. "Split up. Get the folder secured. Keep her safe." Elias grabbed my hand. "Follow my lead," he said. And just like that, we moved, slipping through shadows, ducking behind overturned furniture, dodging the first wave of Victor's men who had poured through the broken windows. The first attack came fast. 2 men lunged at me from opposite sides. I pivoted, swung the folder like a weapon, and felt the weight of justice in my grip. On mon fell. The other stumbled back, shocked by my audacity. Victor Smirk didn't fada. He was watching, waiting, calculating. Every strike, every dodge, every heart-pounding second. It was more than survival. It was proof. Proof that I was no longer the scared girl my father once protected. Proof that I could face the man who had ruined everything. Proof that I could take control of my life and my inheritance back. And now, all that remained was one final confrontation. Victor's voice cut through the smoke. "Give it up, girl, that folder, it's nothing without me. If you're still here, you need to subscribe now. Because what happens in the next few minutes, the choices I make, will decide the fate of everything my father built. And if you won't subscribe, leave a comment explaining why you'd stand aside while the final battle for truth, justice, and legacy unfolds. Because what comes next will change everything." The room felt smaller now, the smoke thickening, the shadows pressing in like living things. Victor Kane stood at the far end, calculating, cruel, impossible to ignore. Every instinct screamed, "Strike first." I gripped the folder tightly. This was the moment. The culmination of everything, years of betrayal, terror, and survival. Victor's men advanced. But this time I wasn't alone. Donovan and Elias flanked me, weapons ready, eyes locked on every movement. He stepped forward, slow, deliberate, like a predator savoring the kill. "You think you can defeat me?" he taunted. "Your father tried, and look where it got him." I met his gaze. "I am not my father," I whispered. "I am better. I am stronger. And I will end what you started. The first wave hit. Gunfire, chaos, and the smell of smoke and sweat filled the room. I ducked behind overturned furniture, narrowly avoiding a spray of bullets. Elias tackled one assailant, while Donovan neutralized another with precision. Every move I made wasn't just survival. It was calculated retribution. Every punch, every dodge, every swing of the folder brought me closer to Victor. Closer to justice. Finally, it was just the two of us. Victor's smirk never wavered. You think this ends tonight? He sneered. It's only just beginning. No. It ends now. Tonight. I would not let fear control me ever again. I lunged, using every ounce of adrenaline and determination. He met me halfway. We grappled. The folder flew from my hands, sliding across the floor. Time slowed. Every second stretched into eternity. Every heartbeat counted. I spotted the nearest edge of the desk. The only advantage left. With a surge of strength I didn't know I had, I swung toward him, using the momentum to unbalance him. He stumbled. And I seized the folder, pressing the evidence against my chest once more. This ends now, I screamed, voice breaking but fierce. Victor realized too late that he had underestimated me. I had survived bullets, betrayal, and terror. I had learned every secret, every weakness. And I would not be stopped. Victor Kane was restrained, disarmed, and captured. Brenda's empire began to crumble, exposed by the documents I had uploaded. Every betrayal, every fraudulent move, every hidden account came to light. I stood there, shaking, breathing hard, but victorious. The folder, my father's legacy, safe in my hands. For the first time, I felt peace. Not just survival. Not just revenge. Justice. Truth. Control. I had reclaimed my life. And in doing so, I had proven one thing. No one, not bullets, not betrayal, not fear, could take what I had earned. Not even my father's enemies. I looked out over the city from the warehouse rooftop. The night was quiet now. No shouts. No shadows. Just the soft hum of a world that had survived the storm. I had survived it too. Stronger. Wiser. And ready to write the next chapter not as a victim, but as the woman who had faced every threat, every lie, every betrayal, and emerged unbroken. The truth will always find a way. And when it does, you better be ready. If you've followed me this far, don't disappear now. Subscribe. Because this story, my story, is just one of many waiting to be told. And if you won't, go into the comments and tell me why you'd walk away, while a life rebuilt on truth hangs in the balance. Because there are always more shadows. And you deserve to see them.